Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I never imagined I'd need to keep the lights on just to feel safe in my own home. But after 1 week in this townhouse, I started doing exactly that. It's not a big or old place, and it sits on a quiet street where people mow their lawns on weekends and nod politely when they see someone walking by. That's what drew me here. I wanted peace after long days at work. Instead, I found myself in the middle of something I still can't fully explain, yet everything about it feels real. I live here alone and I've checked every corner. I've tried ignoring it and I've tried investigating it. So far, the only thing that keeps me from hearing that weird noise is keeping every damn light on. I moved in at the start of the month. The house was advertised as a simple townhouse, connected to one neighbor on the right side. The previous occupant left it in good shape. I signed the lease papers, got my keys, and brought in my furniture on a Friday afternoon. The first weekend was normal. I unpacked, plugged in my TV, arranged my sofa in the living room, set up my bed in the upstairs bedroom. Everything felt fine. The neighborhood was quiet, just as I wanted. The neighbor on the right was barely around. His car was gone most of the time. I heard nothing from him, which was a relief. No loud music, no yelling. On Monday, I started my job routine. I work an office shift that ends around 6. By the time I get home, I'm pretty tired. I cook a quick dinner, watch some TV, maybe wash some dishes, then head to bed. That's my normal schedule, and it went smoothly for a few days. The trouble began around the middle of the week, probably Wednesday night. I woke up at around 2 in the morning. I was lying in bed, disoriented, my eyes barely open. There was this noise. It sounded faint at first, almost like shards of broken glass clinking together. I couldn't tell if it was coming from inside the house or outside. I sat up, turned on my bedside lamp and listened. The noise stopped the moment the light came on. My heart was beating fast. I was confused and still half asleep. I thought maybe I was dreaming. I stayed still for a few minutes, waited, heard nothing else. Eventually, I turned off the lamp and tried to get back to sleep. Within a minute of darkness, the noise returned. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. It reminded me of broken glass pieces being shaken in a box, or maybe wind passing through old windows and rattling something. I got out of bed and walked carefully into the hallway. My legs felt tense, and I gripped the walls for balance. I flicked the hall light on. The noise stopped again. The instant the light illuminated the space, everything went quiet. I stood there in my boxers, scanning the hallway and the staircase. I didn't see anything. The only sound was my fridge humming downstairs. At that point, I was too rattled to go back to sleep, so I checked every room. I opened the closet in the hallway, went down to the kitchen, looked behind the fridge, walked into the living room. Nothing looked disturbed. No broken glass, no piles of anything that might make that noise. I stayed awake until nearly 4, lights on all around me, because every time I considered turning them off, my pulse would jump. Finally, I forced myself to switch everything off except for a little lamp in the living room. I settled on the couch and waited. The noise started again, but it was softer than before. I told myself it had to be pipes or some weird house quirk. I was exhausted, so I dozed off despite the rattling sound. I woke up at 7 with the alarm on my phone going off. The noise was gone. Daylight was creeping through the curtains, and my kitchen looked normal. The next night, I tried to ignore the possibility of more sounds. I ate dinner, watched some TV, and went to bed with the lights off like a normal person. By around 1:30 in the morning, that clinking, scraping sound woke me up again. I snapped awake, feeling that same rush of adrenaline. I switched on my lamp and everything went quiet immediately. My heart was pounding and sweat beaded on my forehead. I muttered something under my breath, probably a curse, then forced myself to get out of bed. I grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs. I kept the upstairs light on as I moved, but the downstairs was dark. The noise started once more, like it was reacting to my presence in some way. It sounded like it was coming from the living room wall, the one adjacent to the neighbor's unit. I moved the flashlight beam around that entire wall. I didn't see cracks or anything out of place. I tapped the wall with my knuckles, but everything felt solid. I turned on the living room light. Right away, the sound vanished. My flashlight beam shook a little because my hand was trembling. I felt this rush of nerves, like the place was messing with me. I stood there, taking slow breaths, and then I turned the living room light off again. The noise came back. It was immediate. My stomach tightened. The hair on my arms stood up. I was hearing glass shards shifting against each other or something that resembled that. I couldn't stand there in the dark any longer, so I flicked the lights back on. After that, I tried to go through each room, systematically checking. I examined the basement, opening every box left by the previous tenant. I found nothing but some old Christmas ornaments, a broken lamp base, and a few plates. None of it was moving, and none of it was broken enough to cause that strange sound. I checked for rodents or insects. I heard no scratching, saw no droppings or nests. The basement was just dusty. I felt a slight chill down there, but that was normal. By 3 a.m, I was fed up. I turned on every light except in the closet under the stairs. In that dark closet, I heard absolutely nothing. It seemed like if the overall house was bright, the noise stayed away, but if the house was dark, it would come back. Finally, I gave up and slept with most lights on. I had a headache when I woke up, but at least I got some rest. Over the next few days, I kept trying to figure it out. I asked a neighbor on the left side of my place, the one who's not connected to my townhouse, if she heard anything weird at night. She said no. She told me her nights were peaceful. I didn't mention the glass noise because I felt a little embarrassed. I only asked if there were any plumbing issues or odd house sounds around here. She just shook her head. I also considered talking to the neighbor on the connected side, but he was never around. His windows stayed dark most of the time. His car was gone. I barely saw him at all. One night, I decided to try something different. I left all my lights on before going to sleep. I wanted to see if the noise would stay away if I kept the entire place lit. It felt wasteful, but I was desperate. I used a few smaller lamps and the overhead lights in the kitchen and hallway. I left the bedroom light on low. Then I lay in bed, fully expecting the noise to start around midnight or 1 a.m. But nothing happened. I slept straight through until my alarm rang. It was the best sleep I'd had in days. I woke up feeling a wave of relief. Maybe the noise was just some trick of the darkness, or maybe it was all in my head, but I doubted that. It felt too real. The following night, I tested the dark again. I left the house in total darkness when I went to bed. I forced myself to stay calm. I told myself it was probably just an odd quirk, and I'd get used to it. I didn't last more than an hour before I heard that scraping, rattling sound again. It seemed to creep along the walls or maybe under the floorboards. I couldn't pinpoint it exactly. My heart raced, my eyes watered a bit, and my hands curled into fists under the blanket. I felt my breath getting shallow. It was a combination of confusion and fear. I turned on the bedside lamp and the noise quit instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch. At that point, I accepted that this wasn't a normal house sound. Pipes, wind, or old wood don't act like that. They don't respond to lights turning on and off. So for my own peace of mind, I kept my lamps on every night for the rest of that week. I felt silly, but I needed to sleep. Every time I sat in the dark, my imagination would go wild, and I'd expect that horrible glass-on-glass scraping. But with the lights on, my house was silent. On Saturday, I had some free time, so I explored every inch again in broad daylight. I moved furniture away from the walls, looking for cracks or broken shelves. I ran water through every faucet to check the plumbing. I even banged on the wall I share with my neighbor's house. No hollow noises, no vibrations that sounded like broken glass. I looked at the ceiling for signs of leaking or broken beams. Nothing. The house was in good shape. I felt a little guilty for blaming my new place for all this, but I couldn't ignore that weird detail. The sound only happened when I turned the lights off. I tried ignoring it for a second time that same Saturday night. I was in the living room. watching a movie with the overhead light off and only the TV lighting up the room. I muted the TV during a quiet scene, and that noise came back. I heard it clicking, rustling, like someone sifting through shards in a plastic bag. My pulse jumped. I flicked on the side lamp and it stopped. My stomach was tight, and I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. I didn't want to show fear in my own house, but I was rattled. I ended up leaving the lamp on for the rest of the night. I thought about going to a hotel for a night just to see if a break would clear my head, but that felt extreme, and money's tight. I also considered inviting a friend over, but I'm not close with many people around here yet. My job isn't the type that gives me easy opportunities for new friendships, so I stayed alone, flipping lights on and off, watching the pattern repeat. Noise when it's dark, no noise when it's light. It's consistent. There's no drifting. It doesn't matter if it's the living room, bedroom, or hallway. As soon as it's dark, that sound kicks in sooner or later. Now I've gotten used to having most lamps on. I'm writing this from my small dining table, and every overhead light is shining. The place feels too bright for night, but at least it's quiet. My utility bill will be high, but that's better than feeling that cold sweat on my neck. It's better than lying awake hearing something move in the walls or in some corner of the house. I'm not saying it's supernatural. It might just be something to do with the wiring, or maybe the neighbor has some odd contraption that only makes noise when everything else is off. But that doesn't explain why it stops the second I switch on a lamp. I haven't fully solved it. I keep telling myself I'll figure it out eventually, but for now, I've made peace with living in a bright house. My nights are well lit, and I rarely hear that terrible glassy sound. I only hear a hint of it if I step into a dark room by accident, like the bathroom when I forget to flip the switch. Then I'll catch a short scrape, and my heart will jump into my throat. I turn the light on fast, and it goes silent again. I'm still curious about the neighbor. I see his car sometimes in the driveway, but the lights in his unit never seem to come on. I haven't worked up the courage or the right excuse to knock on his door. Maybe one day I'll do it, but I don't know what I'd say. Hey, do you hear a bunch of broken glass noise at night? That sounds ridiculous. People don't react well to that kind of conversation. Until I have a better explanation, I'll keep quiet. I'm also aware this could keep going as long as I live here. I doubt it's dangerous, but I can't say it isn't unsettling. Maybe the landlord knows something, but she never mentioned any issues before I signed the lease. I should probably bring it up, but I worry she'll shrug and think I'm making it up. Plus, she might not care as long as I pay rent. So, here I am, living in a perfectly ordinary-looking townhouse that just happens to make a noise like broken glass whenever I'm in the dark. If I had any advice for someone moving here, I'd say, bring extra light bulbs. I know it's strange, but it's the only solution I have. It keeps me from feeling that crawling sensation in my chest when the sound starts up. It helps me relax. I want to feel normal in my own home. So I'll keep the place bright at night, and I'll keep my ears open for anything else that might indicate what's going on. I'm not sure if I'll ever find a clear answer. For now, I've accepted that I live in a place where I can't turn off the lights without hearing something I can't explain. The quiet suburb is still quiet as far as traffic and neighbors go, but the house itself isn't silent in darkness. It's a strange comfort to know that flipping a switch makes it stop, even if I don't know why. So that's where I stand. Lights blazing, nights free of that clinking rattle, days spent wondering if I'm missing something obvious. People drive past outside and see my bright windows, probably thinking I'm afraid of burglars or just a night owl. I don't bother correcting them. I just hope one day I'll get used to this house enough to sleep in darkness without that unnerving sound. For now, though, it's me and my lamps, and at least I can rest without that feeling of glass scraping through my head. Until something changes, that's how it'll stay. I still remember the first time I heard that typing noise. It was the kind of sound that makes you stop and stare at empty space, wondering if you're losing your grip on reality. I was standing in the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, folders in my hands when I froze. I heard clear mechanical keystrokes. It sounded like an old typewriter tapping away, one key after another. I knew our office didn't have a working typewriter, but that clacking sound was there, echoing in the quiet. I work in a small archiving department in a landmarked building downtown. I'm 32, and I lost my last job a few months ago. This place was the first to offer me a steady paycheck. I didn't care about the old walls or the flickering lights, I just needed to pay rent and stay afloat. The building stands between taller, newer structures, so it feels like stepping back in time when I enter. The stone facade has chipped corners. The lobby has worn tiles and a single elevator that moves slower than I'd like. There's always a faint musty odor in the corridors. They told me the building is old and isn't fully updated because the local preservation society has strict rules. I didn't mind. The environment seemed quiet and stable. That was enough for me at first. On my first few days, I worked normal hours, 9 to 6. I was told to sort through decades of old files. The company relocated several times over the years, but they always kept boxes of documents. These got dumped into the basement or the upper floors. Some stuff got stashed in thick metal cabinets that might be older than me. My supervisor, Mr. Garcia, told me it was routine. He handed me a bunch of old manila folders and said, "Get these in order by date, then box them properly." I nodded and got to work. The room where I spend most of my time is on the 3rd floor. It's filled with gray metal shelves that squeak when you brush against them. The overhead lights flicker sometimes. There's a single window, but it faces a wall from the neighboring building, so there's hardly any natural light. The air is stale, and I often crack the door open to let in a bit of circulation. The old floorboards creak under my shoes. On normal days, I barely see anyone else because most employees work on the ground floor in more modern offices. My floor is basically an archive storage area. After my first week, I started staying late because the files kept piling up. Mr. Garcia appreciated my willingness to clock extra hours. I liked the overtime pay. I usually stayed until about 8 or 9 at night. The building is quiet after 6. Most people clear out and only a few lights remain on in the hallways. Sometimes the security guard does a quick round, but he mostly stays in the lobby. I prefer calm work environments, so I didn't complain. I could focus without interruptions. It was during these late hours that I first noticed that typewriter noise. The first time it happened, I was alone on my floor at around 8:30. I had my desk lamp on and I was sorting a stack of invoices from the 1980s. Then I heard gentle tapping. It was distant but distinct. It sounded exactly like someone pressing mechanical keys faster and then slower, as if they were typing a sentence, pausing, then continuing. I stopped working and listened. My pulse sped up. I glanced around, expecting to see a coworker at a desk, but I was alone. I pushed back from my small metal desk and walked into the hallway. The hall was dim, lit by a single overhead fixture. I didn't see anyone. No open office doors. Nothing. I stood there, ears strained, but the noise had stopped. I shook it off and told myself it might be the building's old pipes or maybe a radiator. I went back inside, finished my sorting, and went home. The next night, I stayed late again. Around the same time, I heard it again. Same tapping pattern, mechanical keystrokes like an old typewriter. My shoulders tensed, and I held my breath, trying to pinpoint the direction. It sounded like it was coming from the room next door, which was also filled with old metal shelves and cardboard boxes. I got up and went into that room, turning on the light. It was empty. The cabinets were locked. There were no computers, no machines. The air smelled like dust and metal. I heard no tapping then. Silence. I left the light on, thinking maybe I'd catch it if it started again. But for the rest of that evening, I heard nothing. At 9, I shut off the lights and stepped out. Right when I turned the switch, I heard that clack, clack, clack behind me. I flicked the light back on. Silence again. My heart pounded. I looked around with a tight chest, but everything was still. I turned the light off once more. Same noise right after I killed the light. This time I felt a wave of goosebumps on my arms. I decided not to stand around any longer. I hurried to the elevator and left. By the time I got home, my shirt was damp from sweat. I tried to convince myself it was the building settling. Maybe there was some mechanical device that only operated after a certain hour. I slept uneasily, but I returned to work the next day, determined to ignore it. That day was normal until about 7:30 in the evening. The office was dead quiet. I had an overhead lamp on again, rummaging through old payroll records. My back was stiff from leaning over the files. I got up to stretch and I heard the same noise again. The tapping was faint. I felt my chest tighten. I walked out into the corridor. The lights were dim. The sound seemed to be coming from further down the hall, near a locked storage room. That room is rarely used, but the caretaker keeps it unlocked on occasion to access old equipment. I walked toward it, each step echoing on the floorboards. My skin was cold, and my pulse throbbed in my temples. I reached the door. It was closed, but not locked. I turned the knob and the hinges squeaked. I stepped in. It smelled like old paper and a hint of mildew. I saw metal shelves and a few broken chairs stacked in the corner. I scanned every inch of that small space. I saw no computers, no devices, certainly no typewriter. I listened. Nothing. Then I caught a faint scuttling noise, which might have been a rat. The building has pests, and we get exterminators sometimes, but it's never fully resolved. I let out a shaky breath and walked back to my desk. The typewriter noise returned around 8:15. It sounded so close, as if someone sat at a desk just behind me. My arms tingled with goosebumps again. I spun around, expecting to see movement. The air was still. That's when I decided to check every piece of equipment on my floor. I opened all the drawers, turned on lights in each storage room, and even peeked behind filing cabinets. I found nothing that could make that mechanical tapping. No hidden typewriter, no old data entry machine. I walked the hallway, flicking my flashlight around the corners. I even checked the ceiling for weird piping. Nothing. And still, I heard that clacking sound in the distance. I told Mr. Garcia about it the next morning. He stared at me for a moment and shrugged. He said, "We used to have typewriters in the building, but we got rid of them years ago. Maybe you're hearing something from outside." I knew the windows were sealed shut. It wasn't coming from outside, but I didn't argue. He told me not to worry so much. So that night, I stayed again. I wanted the overtime, but I also wanted to see if it would happen again. I couldn't focus on anything else because that noise was always in the back of my mind. Sure enough, after 8, I started hearing it. Same pattern, same mechanical sound. I put on my jacket, walked the entire floor, and checked behind every closed door. I saw no one. The floors below were dark. The security guard was at the front desk on the ground floor. No one else was around. My senses were on high alert. My neck and shoulders were tight. My stomach churned with anxiety and my hands felt clammy. Each time I heard that clack, my heart thumped. It wasn't loud, but it was there. It never stopped for more than a few minutes. At around 9, I decided to head home. Right as I flipped the light switch off in my office, the typing got louder. I froze with my hand on the switch. I listened, breathing in shallow bursts. It went on for a few seconds, then faded. I didn't turn the light back on. I just left. As I walked down the hallway, I could still hear a faint tapping behind me. I got in the elevator, rode down, and waved goodnight to the guard with a forced smile. Over the next week, the same pattern repeated. Any time I was alone after 8, I heard typing. It seemed to follow me around the floor. No matter which room I checked, it always sounded like it was coming from the next room over or the hallway behind me. It never started before 8. It always began once the building was quiet. I started to dread the evenings. I found myself checking my watch every 10 minutes, waiting for that moment it would begin. My hands shook sometimes when I was alone. My throat got dry and I had to sip water repeatedly. The tension made my body stiff, and I left the office each night with a headache from clenching my jaw. At one point, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. I considered that it might be stress or exhaustion, but everything else felt normal. The documents I archived were real. My interactions with Mr. Garcia were ordinary. The only strange thing was that typing noise. I tried talking to the security guard about it. He just shrugged and said he never goes upstairs after 8. I asked if the building had any old hidden rooms. He said not that he knew of. One Friday night, I worked later than usual because I wanted to finish a big stack of files before the weekend. I stayed until about 10. Around 9:30, the lights started flickering in the hallway. I assumed it was another electrical glitch. I heard the typing again, steady and calm. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. The air felt colder than usual. I decided to stand in the hallway with all the lights off, just to listen. Maybe I could track down the exact direction of the sound. So I turned off the lights in my office and stepped out quietly. I leaned against the wall and waited. My breathing was slow and my palms were slick with sweat. The tapping started up in a rhythmic way, as if someone was writing a paragraph. It seemed to be coming from the far end of the hall. I moved carefully, watching my step on the old floorboards. My shoes made a soft creak. The typing noise continued, steady. I reached the last door on the left, which was a locked storeroom. I pressed my ear to it. The typing was loud on the other side. My heart thumped so hard I felt it in my throat. The doorknob was locked. I fiddled with it, and it rattled. For a moment I considered going back for a key or calling the security guard. Then the typing stopped. The hallway felt suffocatingly still. The short hairs on my arms stood up, and I felt a chill at the back of my neck. I could hear my own pulse. I waited a few seconds, but the noise didn't return. So I turned around, walked back to my desk, packed my things, and left as fast as I could. From then on, I tried to avoid working past 7. Some evenings, I had no choice because Mr. Garcia piled up more tasks. When that happened, the typing always resumed at 8 or a little after. I started wearing headphones to block it out. But sometimes, even with music on, I'd swear I heard faint clacking underneath whatever I was listening to. The feeling of being watched crept up on me. I checked behind me repeatedly. Once I spun around so quickly I knocked over a stack of papers. I was shaking with adrenaline. 2 weeks ago, I decided I'd had enough. I wanted to catch this once and for all. I stayed until 9 and carried a flashlight. I checked every office on my floor while the sound was active. I knocked on walls, tapped on the pipes, and opened every cabinet. There was no hidden typewriter. There was no person. The noise kept shifting from one side of the corridor to the other. My frustration grew. My chest felt tight from tension. The hair on my neck stood on end. That slow, steady clacking kept me on edge. I lost track of time as I searched every corner. Eventually, I realized it was almost 10:30. My body was exhausted. My ears were ringing. The noise was still there, taunting me. I left in a hurry and nearly tripped going down the stairs because I didn't want to wait for the old elevator. This has been going on for a month and a half now. Every night after 8, if I stay, I hear that noise. I can't find any explanation for it. I've checked all the computers, but none have mechanical keyboards. Everyone uses modern equipment. Also, nobody else stays on my floor after 6. I've confirmed that. The security logs show no one swiping in or out at those hours except me. Mr. Garcia offered no real help. He just said to try earplugs or leave earlier. I still need the money, so I continue to work late sometimes. The noise hasn't hurt me. It's just there, an unwanted presence. It makes my neck tense, my hands sweat, and my heart rate spike. Every time I switch off the office light, I hear that typing even more clearly. It's like it waits until the lights go down and the hallway empties. Then it starts up, steady and soft. I can't figure it out, and it feels impossible to ignore. Yet every time I leave, I rush out with my breath shallow and my nerves frayed. At this point, I'm not sure what else I can do. The building is old, and the preservation rules prevent major renovations. Maybe there's something in the walls. Maybe it's an old system that kicks in at night. But it sounds exactly like typewriter keys. It's not random. It has a pattern, like someone's writing. And even though I've tried to catch it in action, I've never found anyone. The worst part is the moment I power off my desk lamp and step into the hallway. That's when the noise feels closest, like it's only a few feet behind me. My skin prickles and I walk quickly to the elevator, forcing myself not to run. I grip the elevator gate with sweaty hands and jab the button until it closes. Then I step out into the lobby with my heart hammering. That's all I know. Every time I stay late, the tapping starts around 8 and keeps going until I leave. I can't say I've gotten used to it, but I'm able to endure it long enough to finish my work. I have no proof of what it is, just my own experience each night. The building is old, quiet, and half empty. The environment amplifies every small noise. The typewriter sound is distinctive, though. It's nothing like the hum of a computer. I've checked everything and nobody else is there. Yet the noise persists. It's there day after day, waiting for me to hear it. If I try to ignore it, it grows louder, forcing me to pay attention. And when I finally decide to leave, it follows me, key by key, until I'm outside. I'm still working here and I don't see myself quitting soon. But every evening I stay past 8, that clacking noise comes back, and I never find its source. I've accepted it as part of my routine. It's not comforting, but it's predictable. And no matter how many times I try to uncover the cause, I end the night with the same question in my head. Who or what is typing in that empty room? And why does it always wait for the lights to go out? I knew something was wrong on my second night in that old brick building. I was lying in bed after a long day at work, and I heard a faint shuffling from above. It sounded like someone dragging their feet across the floor. At first I thought it was just the tenant in the apartment above mine, but it kept going, slow and steady, like they were pacing. The building had thick walls, so I rarely heard anything else. No voices, no TV sounds, nothing but that soft scrape, scrape, scrape. It set my nerves on edge, but I tried to ignore it and went to sleep. The next morning I felt unsettled. I decided I would check it out later if it kept happening. My apartment is on the second floor of a 3-story building. The third floor only has one unit. When I moved in, the landlord said a man lived upstairs, but I never saw him. The building is old, made of red brick, and it has a narrow staircase that creaks in a few spots. The paint on the walls in the hallway is faded beige. There's a single overhead light that buzzes when it's on. The doors are thick, with heavy brass knobs that turn with a stiff feeling. On my third night, I heard the same shuffling noise. I was watching a show on my laptop. I paused it and tilted my head. The scraping moved slowly across the ceiling. My heart picked up a little. I got up and stood on my couch to press my ear against the ceiling. It was faint, but it was there. I thought about complaining, but it was only around 9 p.m., and the noise wasn't loud. It was just odd. After a while, it stopped. I went to bed, trying to ignore the weird tension in my stomach. A few days passed, and the noise returned at random times. Sometimes I heard it in the morning before I left for work. Other times it woke me up around midnight. It always sounded the same. Soft steps, dragging across the floor, then a pause, then more steps. I never heard doors open or close. I never heard a voice. It was just footsteps. But the strangest moment happened one evening when I got home late. It was after 11 p.m., and I was tired. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, turned the key, and stepped inside. The hallway light was still on because it's on a timer. My door closes with a loud click. It always does. I put down my stuff, took off my jacket, and kicked off my shoes. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs. They sounded like they were coming down from the third floor. I thought it was the neighbor I had never met, so I opened my door, planning to say hello. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued. I heard them coming closer, but no one was there. My stomach tightened and I stood still in my doorway listening. The sound passed me, right where a person would have been walking, and kept going down the steps to the ground floor. Then it stopped. I waited a few seconds, but I heard nothing else. My skin felt cold. My heart was pounding. I closed the door, locked it, and stood with my back against it. I told myself maybe the noise was traveling in a weird way through the pipes or something like that. But the building's plumbing didn't usually make any noise at all. There were no radiators clanking or water pipes humming. It was just quiet, except for those slow steps. Over the next week, I tried to bring it up with my landlord. She shrugged and said she'd never had any complaints like that. She said the upstairs tenant wasn't around much. Maybe he was moving furniture, she suggested. But it didn't sound like furniture to me. It was too consistent, like a person walking. I also asked the lady who lived on the first floor if she ever heard strange footsteps. She just said no. She smiled politely but seemed like she didn't want to chat. So I dropped it. I started paying attention to the hallway more. The stairs creaked when I walked on them, but not every step. The overhead light flickered sometimes. The door to the third-floor apartment looked normal, with a standard peephole and a plain doormat. One evening, I pressed my ear to that door. I felt a little stupid, but I wanted to check if the neighbor was home. I heard nothing inside. I knocked softly. No answer. I didn't want to be pushy, so I went back to my place. After that, the footsteps became more frequent. They didn't follow a strict schedule, but they never failed to appear at least once a day. Sometimes I heard them as soon as I got home around 6 p.m. Other times they came around midnight or even later. It was always the same slow, dragging sound. It reminded me of someone walking without lifting their feet properly. It put me on edge. I'd freeze wherever I was in the apartment and listen. I tried to pinpoint exactly where they were coming from. My ceiling? The hallway? The stairs? It felt like they floated around, but always with the same slow pattern. One Friday night, I had enough. I was sitting at my small table in the kitchen, eating a sandwich. The scraping started above me. I stood up and rushed into the hallway with my keys in my hand. I wanted to catch whoever was making the noise. I climbed the stairs to the third floor. The building was quiet except for a faint hum from the overhead light. I walked up to the apartment door and put my ear against it. Silence. I gently tried the doorknob, feeling a bit anxious about crossing a line. It didn't move. I considered knocking, but for some reason I felt uneasy. I walked back down to the second floor and paused. The hallway felt cold. I realized I was breathing fast. I had goosebumps on my arms. I heard nothing. No steps, no creaks. It was like the building was holding its breath. I locked myself inside my apartment and turned on all the lights. It was a small place, just a living room connected to a tiny kitchen, a short hallway, a bathroom, and a bedroom. The walls were painted off-white. The living room window faced the street, where I could see the headlights of passing cars through old blinds. I stood there for a few minutes, unsure of what to do. Finally, I sat on my couch and turned on the TV for background noise. I left it on low volume, but my ears stayed alert for any new sounds. My chest felt tight. I kept glancing at my front door. Hours later, when I was getting ready for bed, I heard the footsteps again, but this time they were outside in the hallway. Slow steps, like someone going up the stairs. My heart started racing. I stepped into the hallway of my apartment right by the front door and listened carefully. The footsteps reached my door and paused. I held my breath. My palms were sweating. Then the steps continued, heading up to the third floor. There was no voice. No shadow under my door. No physical presence I could see. I felt a chill run through my chest. I wanted to fling the door open and check, but I was too tense to move. After a minute, I turned the deadbolt quietly. I waited another minute, then pressed my ear to the door. I heard nothing. It was quiet again. The next morning, I felt tired from lack of sleep. I decided to wait in the hallway at certain times to see if I could catch the person. I brought a small folding chair from my living room and placed it near my door. I sat there for almost an hour in the evening, reading something on my phone, occasionally looking up at the stairs. Nobody came. The hallway smelled slightly of old wood polish. It was still and boring. I went back inside, feeling a bit foolish but also frustrated. Later that night, around 10 p.m., I heard the steps again. It was like they started on the ground floor and worked their way up slowly. Scrape, pause. My body tensed. I grabbed my phone and quietly opened the door a crack. The hallway was empty. I leaned out and looked down the stairs. Nothing, but the footsteps kept coming. They reached the second-floor landing and stopped. The air felt heavy. I stood there holding my breath. My phone screen was still lit, showing the time. Then the footsteps continued. I heard them going up the last flight of stairs toward the third floor. Once they reached the top, everything went quiet. I tiptoed back into my apartment, locked the door, and sat on my couch. My legs felt shaky. I kept thinking about how the hallway was empty. There was no one there. But the steps were clear, like a real person's footsteps. They had weight. They made the old floors creak faintly. I felt a chill in my arms. I stared at my locked door, trying to make sense of everything. I tried asking around again. I knocked on the first-floor tenant's door, but she only opened it a crack and said she had nothing to report. She seemed scared to talk. I asked if anyone else used the staircase. She just shook her head and said the top-floor apartment was rented, but she hardly saw the tenant. She said something about the building being old and the noises not surprising her. Then she closed her door. A week later, the situation hadn't changed. Every day I heard at least one round of those shuffling footsteps. Sometimes they circled around above me. Other times they went up or down the stairs. Sometimes I opened my door a moment too late. Sometimes I caught it in progress, but never saw anyone. The landlord told me she couldn't do much if I didn't have proof of actual disturbance. The building had no leaks or structural issues. The maintenance guy checked the pipes and found nothing unusual. One night I was determined to confront whoever was out there. I waited by my door, ear pressed against the wood. The hallway was silent for an hour. Then, at around midnight, I heard the footsteps. They started upstairs, above my head. They moved across the floor, then down the stairs. I yanked the door open at the exact moment they would have passed by. No one was there, but the steps kept going, heading down toward the first floor. I leaned over the railing, looking below. I saw nothing. The sound of someone descending echoed in the narrow space, but I couldn't see any figure or shadow. My mouth went dry and my arms prickled. After a few seconds, the sound faded away on the ground floor. I shut my door and locked it, my heart pounding like I'd sprinted a mile. At that point, I was on edge all the time. My sleep pattern was messed up. I was jumping at every little noise. The tension in my chest never went away. I started having trouble focusing at work because I kept thinking about those phantom footsteps. I'd come home and stand in the hallway for a moment, bracing myself for the possibility of hearing them again. Some nights were quiet. Other nights, the shuffling came multiple times. I'd open my door and stare, trying to see if maybe it was a trick of the light or my ears. But it wasn't. I could feel the slight vibration in the floorboards when it happened. It was so real, and yet there was no person there. It's been a few weeks now, and nothing has changed. Sometimes I try talking out loud, like I'm addressing whatever is making those footsteps. I'll say, "Hello? Is someone there?" I never get a response, and the footsteps never pause. They just keep going until they stop on their own. I've had moments where I felt a presence right outside my door, like the air was heavier. But when I look through the peephole, the hallway is empty. I can't shake the feeling that the footsteps belong to someone I can't see. It scares me, but it also makes me feel uneasy in a way I can't fully describe. I've considered moving out. The rent is cheap, and the place itself is decent, but these experiences keep me on high alert. I don't like the tension in my own home. I've tried telling a friend about it, and he just joked that the place is haunted. I don't know what to believe. I only know what I hear. Slow, dragging footsteps at all hours, shuffling up and down the stairs or pacing the floor above. Thick brick walls that hide almost every other noise, yet somehow let this one through. An empty corridor whenever I look. No explanation from the neighbor or the landlord. Each time I hear those footsteps, my pulse spikes and I stop whatever I'm doing. My breathing gets shallow and I get a knot in my stomach. I hate that feeling. It's like I'm being watched even though there's never anyone there. I've tried recording on my phone, but I mostly pick up faint creaks. Nothing conclusive. It's like the sound doesn't translate well into the recording. I even tried a small voice recorder overnight, but I only got static and a few random clicks. I don't know if I can keep living here, but at the same time I hesitate to leave. A part of me wants to see if there's some logical explanation. I keep telling myself it might be old plumbing or some strange acoustics, but each time I open my door in the exact moment the steps should be passing, I see nothing. I feel my hair standing on end, and I realize there's no simple answer. It's after midnight right now, and I'm sitting at my small kitchen table writing this down. My overhead light is buzzing softly. My living room is dark, except for the glow from the streetlights outside. I'm waiting to see if I hear those footsteps again tonight. My pulse is a little fast. My shoulders are tense. I just heard a faint creak from the stairs, but I can't tell if it's the usual settling or something else. All I know is that the pattern continues. Someone or something keeps walking those stairs, moving around the third floor, and never appears. I think I heard it again just now, so I'm going to check. My heart is racing, and I feel cold all over. I'll open the door one more time. Maybe I'll finally see who or what is out there, or maybe I won't see anything at all. I came here thinking I'd get a break from city noise and endless distractions. Instead, I found myself stuck in a small, isolated house, hearing something slam against the walls at night. Every time I close my eyes, I can't stop imagining what might be circling around out there. I thought I was prepared for a rustic stay. I wasn't prepared for what happens after 11 p.m. I rented this place for a few weeks because I needed quiet to finish writing some detailed reports for work. My office back in the city was too noisy. My apartment felt cramped. I wanted an uninterrupted stretch of time to concentrate. Online, I found a listing for a cheap, simple cottage about 2 kilometers off the main road. The photos showed a small wooden structure with a tiny front porch and a few simple rooms. No neighbors, no traffic, no tourist traps. I booked it without much thought. The landlord sounded polite enough over the phone. He told me there was no internet or TV, but there was electricity and running water. I was fine with that. I arrived on a Monday afternoon. The sky was clear, and the sun felt warm on my shoulders. The dirt road leading to the cottage was full of potholes and rocks, so I drove slowly. There were open fields on both sides, and beyond that, a mix of woods and hills. The place looked peaceful. When I pulled up in front of the cottage, I stepped out of my car and took a deep breath. The air smelled like grass and soil. The landlord wasn't there, but he had left the key in a small box attached to the front door. I used it to get inside. The interior was plain. There was a small kitchen with a gas stove, a narrow living area with an old couch and a wooden table, and a bedroom that barely fit the bed and a nightstand. The bathroom was at the end of a short hallway. The walls were rough wooden boards, and there were a few dusty windows. I checked each switch. The lights worked, the water ran, the toilet flushed. Everything was basic but enough for me. I set my suitcase on the bed and walked around to get a feel for the place. The first afternoon passed quietly. I unpacked my laptop, notebooks, and pens, then set up on the table in the living area. I spent some hours typing out a draft of my report. The only noises were the occasional bird outside and a faint rustling of leaves when a breeze came through. Around dinner time, I made a quick meal on the gas stove. I ate while listening to the silence. It felt relaxing at first. That night, I went to bed around 10 p.m. I was tired from the drive and wanted to get an early start the next morning. The mattress felt stiff and the sheets were coarse, but I was too exhausted to care. At some point, I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like a single knock on the outside wall near where my bed was. I lifted my head and listened. Everything seemed quiet again. I told myself it was probably just the house settling or a piece of wood expanding with the temperature change. I pushed my face into the pillow and tried to go back to sleep. The next day went fine. I worked on my reports, walked around the property a bit, and ate lunch in the sunlight. That second night, though, I heard it again. A knock, then 2 more, around 11:15 p.m. They were soft but clear, like someone tapping on the outside boards with their knuckles. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I waited, but the knocking stopped. I got up, turned on a flashlight, and walked to the front door. I opened it carefully and shone the beam around. Nothing. No wind, no trees close enough to tap the walls, and no sign of animals. The grass was still. The only sound I noticed was my own breathing. I shut the door and went back to bed. I didn't sleep well. Over the next few nights, the knocking became more pronounced, and always after 11 p.m. On the fourth night, it started closer to midnight. I heard a series of taps that moved along the wall. It wasn't random scratching or scuttling. It sounded intentional, almost like a pattern. My pulse raced each time it began. I kept telling myself it might be a raccoon or a fox, but I never found tracks or droppings. On the fifth night, it was raining. Around 10 p.m., the wind picked up. By 11 p.m., heavy drops hammered the roof. I stayed up late, typing on my laptop and hoping the noise of the storm would drown out any weird sounds. But at 11:30 p.m., I heard a distinct, rhythmic banging on the far side of the living area wall. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, like something or someone tapping in time with the rain. I jumped to my feet and grabbed my flashlight. My hands were shaking a bit. I forced myself to step outside into the downpour. The rain soaked my jacket within seconds, and my jeans clung to my legs. I walked along the side of the cottage, aiming the flashlight at the wall. There was only wet wood, hammered by rain. I circled around to the back, careful not to slip in the muddy grass. The tapping had stopped. I waited, my teeth chattering, but there was nothing except the roar of rainfall. Eventually, I went back inside, dripping water all over the floor. My heart was still pounding. I dried off with a towel, changed clothes, and tried to relax. I didn't sleep until about 2 a.m. The next morning, I went outside to check the ground. The grass was flattened by the rain, and everything was soggy. I saw no footprints, no paw prints, no trails. The area was empty. I started feeling tense during the day too, because I knew nighttime was coming. I dreaded that hour after 11 p.m. I tried playing music on my phone to distract myself, but the signal was too weak. I had no TV, no radio. I felt alone and cut off. By the seventh night, I was thinking of packing up and leaving early. But I still had work to finish, and I had paid for the cottage in advance, so I tried to tough it out. I thought maybe the sounds were just my imagination amplifying something normal. That evening, I cooked some pasta and ate while staring at my laptop screen. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard a soft rustling outside, but it might have been the wind. My stomach felt tight and my shoulders were stiff. I kept checking the time on my phone. A few minutes past 11 p.m., the knocking started again. I grabbed my flashlight right away and stepped out onto the porch, ignoring the fact that my pulse was racing. The night was still. The moon was partially hidden behind clouds. I walked around the cottage slowly, shining the light on every piece of wood. I didn't see any marks. The knocking sounded like it was on the opposite side. I walked there, but it stopped. I waited and listened. All I heard was my own breathing, heavy and anxious. I couldn't pinpoint the direction. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Back inside, I locked the door and stared at the walls. I felt ridiculous and scared. My chest felt tight, and I couldn't focus on writing. I told myself to calm down, but my mind kept racing. What if someone was messing with me? But who? There were no other houses around for miles. The main road was too far away for random passers-by. The landlord lived in another town. I didn't think he'd come all the way here just to tap on the walls. Over the next days, the same pattern continued. During the daylight hours, the place felt normal. Birds chirped, the sun shone on the grass, and a few clouds drifted across the sky. I would spend hours typing or pacing around, trying to figure out if I was losing it. But then, after 11 p.m., the tapping would begin. Sometimes it lasted only a few seconds. Sometimes it went on for several minutes. There were nights I heard it near the windows, almost like someone gently hitting the glass with a fingertip. Other nights, It was on the wooden walls, moving around the house in short bursts. One night, I decided to sit near the back window with all the lights off. I kept my flashlight beside me. It was around midnight when I heard the tapping. This time, it was definitely at the back of the cottage. The sound was low, rhythmic, a thump, thump, thump. My heart started pounding and I felt my skin get clammy. I tried to steady my breathing. Without turning on the flashlight yet, I slowly got up and crept toward the window. I pressed my face against the glass, but it was dark outside. I couldn't see anything. Then the tapping stopped. I flicked on the flashlight and aimed it outside. No movement, no shape, nothing but wet grass. I woke up the next morning feeling exhausted. My neck was sore from tension, and I had a dull headache. I considered calling someone to come stay with me, but I didn't have any close friends who could make the trip on short notice. Also, I felt embarrassed to explain the situation. I thought about calling the landlord, but what would I say? That I kept hearing knocks at night and saw no one? I doubted he'd take me seriously. The following evening, it rained again. This time, the sound of raindrops created a steady backdrop, making it harder to hear anything else. But sure enough, around 11:30 p.m., there it was, that knock, that pounding. It seemed louder in the rain. I grabbed my flashlight again, threw on a raincoat and headed outside. The grass was slippery and the mud pulled at my boots. My heart thudded in my ears. I circled around to the back, following the repetitive knocks. When I reached the area behind the cottage, I could still hear the sound, but I didn't see anything. I felt my stomach twist. The hair on my arms stood on end. I shouted, "Hello? Who's there?" My voice sounded shaky over the rain. No response. The knocking cut out instantly. I took a few more steps, shining the light across the wet grass. Nothing. I noticed my hands were trembling. My jacket was drenched. My shoulders ached from tension. After standing there for a full minute, I gave up and walked back inside. As soon as I locked the door behind me, the knocking started again, this time on the front side of the cottage. I almost dropped the flashlight. I dashed to the front door and yanked it open. Nothing. The night air felt cold on my skin. The porch was empty. The rain was relentless. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was hammering. I shut the door and went straight to the bathroom. I stood over the sink and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection in the mirror showed how tired and anxious I was. There were dark circles under my eyes. My skin looked pale. I spent the rest of that rainy night huddled in bed, staring at the ceiling. The knocking happened off and on like it was teasing me. I barely slept. Over the next few days, I got less and less work done. I kept checking the walls and windows for signs of damage or tampering. I never found a single clue. One morning, I tried scanning the ground more carefully. I looked for any footprints, broken branches, or disturbances in the soil. I even considered the possibility of an animal, but it all seemed too neat. I saw no holes, no fur, no tracks. My nerves were shot. Every small creak during the day made me jump. I began to dread nightfall as soon as I woke up. At around the 2-week mark, I was ready to pack my things and leave, job unfinished or not. I remember sitting at the table with my laptop, looking at the half-finished reports, feeling my stomach twist with anxiety. I didn't want to step outside in the dark anymore. On my last night there, the sky was cloudy. The air felt thick, like it might rain again. I decided I would leave first thing in the morning. After dinner, I tried to distract myself by going over my notes, but my thoughts kept drifting to the impending sounds. The clock ticked toward 11 p.m. By 11:10 p.m., and I braced myself for it. The knocks came again, subtle at first, then they got louder, more deliberate. I sat in the living area with my flashlight off, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. The sound moved along the outside wall. My breath caught in my throat. My palms were sweaty. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. The knock circled around to the back, then along the far side, then near the bedroom window. There was no clear pattern except that it was slow and spaced out. I clenched my fists. I wanted to do something, but I couldn't think of any solution. I just sat there, tense, until it finally stopped around 1 a.m. I barely slept that night. As soon as the sun rose, I loaded my car with my suitcase and my laptop bag. My shoulders ached from stress and my eyes felt gritty. I locked up the cottage, slid the key back into the small box, and started the engine. While driving away, I glanced back in the rearview mirror. The wooden house stood there, still and silent in the morning light. No movement, no sound. I felt relieved to be leaving it behind. I never found out what caused those knocks. Part of me wanted to stay until I could figure it out. Another part of me couldn't handle one more sleepless night in that place. Now, whenever I remember that cottage, I recall the stillness of the fields, the distant sound of rain, and that repetitive knocking on the walls. If someone asked me why it freaked me out so much, I can only say that it happened when everything else was silent and nothing was around. There's something about hearing a knock in the night when you know you're alone that gets under your skin. It felt real, and that was enough to terrify me. I moved into this loft a few months ago. It's at the top floor of an old commercial building that got converted into residential units a while back. At first glance, everything seemed updated. The walls looked clean, the paint job was fresh, and the landlord installed modern fixtures in every unit. But the building's original elevator shafts remained in place, and someone only adapted them to fit the new design. I didn't think much of it. I was more focused on moving in, arranging my furniture, and settling into a spot that offered a good view of the city. On my first night, I heard something around midnight. It sounded like an elevator ding. I was half asleep, but I caught the familiar chime, the kind you hear when an elevator arrives at your floor. I ignored it. In any old building, you expect random noises. I figured someone might be getting home late or leaving for a night shift. When I woke up the next morning, I forgot all about it. A few days later, the same thing happened. It was just past midnight. I was watching a show with the volume turned low. Then I heard the elevator ding again. I paused the TV because the sound was very close, like it was right outside my door. I got up, walked to the door, and listened. I heard the door slide open. My pulse picked up, but I told myself it was just a neighbor. I waited for footsteps or voices, but I heard nothing. Just the mechanical hum of the elevator and then the doors shutting. When I looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. That was weird, but I figured maybe someone got off on the wrong floor, realized it, and left again. It didn't make sense, but I let it go. Life gets busy, and I had other things on my mind. It started happening more often. Almost every night at the same time, right around midnight, I'd hear the elevator ding, open, then close again. One night I decided to open my door quickly to catch whoever was out there. I was barefoot and the hallway light seemed brighter than usual. I saw the elevator door still open, but there was nobody inside. My heart raced. The elevator stayed open for a few seconds, then shut and went down. I could feel the air move when the doors closed. It brushed against my face. I stood there for maybe half a minute, just staring at the metal doors. Then I felt a chill on the back of my neck. I told myself it was just a mechanical glitch, maybe a faulty sensor. Still, I felt uneasy. The next day, I went down to talk to the building manager. He's a friendly guy, around in his 50s, always wearing a polo shirt. I told him about the elevator coming up on its own, opening on my floor with nobody inside. He frowned and said he hadn't heard about any serious issue with the elevator. He said they installed a new panel not long ago, and the sensors were tested. According to him, there were no errors or short circuits. I asked if maybe it was random or on some kind of schedule. He said no. The elevator shouldn't just travel to the top floor by itself, especially not at the same time every night. He promised to check the system logs. A couple of days later, he told me nothing looked out of place. I started paying closer attention. I'd watch the hallway near midnight. Sometimes I'd stand right inside my doorway with the door cracked open so I could hear everything. Other times I'd stay farther inside my loft, keeping the lights dim so I could catch a glimpse of anything unusual. But no matter how ready I was, half the time the elevator wouldn't come. The other half, it arrived when I wasn't expecting it. It felt like it knew when I was prepared with my phone to record it. I wanted evidence. I tried standing out there with my camera app open. Nothing happened. I'd wait 10-15 minutes, no elevator. Then I'd give up, put my phone away, close my door, and ding, the elevator would show up. It was driving me nuts. I remember a night when I was feeling a bit more daring than usual. Around midnight, I heard the ding. I rushed out, phone in hand, recording. The doors were open, no one inside. I could see the interior lights flickering slightly. The metal handrails and the mirrored walls reflected the overhead lighting. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. I stepped closer, trying to hold my phone steady. The screen was capturing the elevator's empty interior, but I was also capturing my own reflection in that mirror. I tried to hold my breath to keep the shot smooth. Right then, the doors started to close. I stuck out my foot to stop them. That's when my phone froze. It wouldn't record. The app locked up. I stared at the screen, tapping it, but nothing happened. Then the elevator doors pulled shut. I jerked my foot away. The elevator started its descent. The screen on my phone was stuck. I couldn't save or play back what I'd filmed. When I forced the phone to reboot, the recording was gone. I had nothing to show for it. That incident pissed me off. I'm not someone who jumps to supernatural explanations, I'm more practical. But it felt personal, like the elevator was toying with me. I decided to do some research on the building. It used to be an office space for different companies. Nothing dramatic popped up in my search. I found old news articles about the place getting renovated, about new tenants, but no major incidents. I thought maybe there would be some old report about an accident. I didn't find anything. The building just seemed like an average old structure that got converted for people who want a place in the city center. No big headlines, no tragedies. That was a relief, but it didn't explain the elevator's behavior. I tried talking to other residents. Most of them shrugged and said they never had any issues with the elevators. A woman on the 5th floor told me her elevator sometimes dinged at odd times, but she assumed it was just neighbors going up or down. Nobody I spoke to had the same experience of it arriving alone, doors opening, then shutting. It seemed to be happening just on my floor, or at least I was the only one noticing. One night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living area with all the lights off. The only illumination came from the city outside. At midnight, sure enough, I heard that ding. My heartbeat kicked up. I got up quietly, walked to my door, and opened it a crack. There was the elevator with its doors open. I heard a faint buzzing sound inside. There was a slight flicker of the overhead light in the elevator car. It felt different. Colder, maybe. Or maybe that was my imagination. I stood there, not moving, until the doors closed again. I watched the elevator display and saw it go down. I had a tight feeling in my chest, like I was holding my breath for too long. After that, I started dreading midnight. I'd find myself staring at the clock around 11:50, anticipating that noise. On some nights it never happened. On other nights I heard it multiple times. It was never chaotic. It was always that calm, consistent ding, followed by the door opening and then closing after a short pause. Sometimes I'd go out and just see the closed elevator. Other times I'd catch it open. Each time it made my palms sweat. I'd wipe my hands on my pants and step back into my loft. I wasn't proud of feeling so on edge, but I couldn't help it. I tried to keep a journal for a while, writing down the exact times I heard the elevator. I wanted to see if there was a pattern. The times did vary slightly, sometimes 12:02, sometimes 12:10, sometimes right at midnight, but it was always in that midnight window. I tried leaving the hallway light on. Didn't stop it. I tried sleeping with earplugs. I still sensed it somehow. My body felt alert at that time, like I was waiting for it to show up. Eventually, I reached out to the building manager again. This time, I asked him if I could see the mechanical room or if there was any chance of looking at the elevator control system. He said that was off limits to residents. Liability reasons. I explained what was happening in more detail. He seemed confused, but not hostile. He said he believed me that something was off, but there was no proof on the building's security logs. He pointed out that the cameras in the lobby and the other floors never caught anything unusual. As far as the system was concerned, the elevator never made any unscheduled stops. There wasn't a single alert or error code around midnight. I told him that was impossible because I stood right there watching the elevator open. He just shook his head, said he'd keep looking into it, and that was that. I left feeling frustrated. I started to wonder if I was missing something basic. Could the system have a glitch that didn't register on the logs? Could there be some signal that was triggering it to come up at those times? I tried turning off every electronic device in my loft one night. I powered down my phone, laptop, TV, anything that might emit a signal. Midnight came. Ding. The elevator arrived again. I felt a wave of anxiety. My stomach tightened. I stepped out to see the elevator doors open. The same soft hum. I noticed the overhead light flickering for a moment. Then it stabilized. My eyes scanned the interior, searching for any detail. The floor was bare. The handrail was cold steel. The walls were mirrored. Nothing was out of place. Still, it felt wrong. When the doors started to close, I backed up. I let them shut. The elevator descended. I kept telling myself it had to be a glitch, but a small part of me felt uneasy in a way I couldn't ignore. Each time it happened, the air felt heavier. My body would tense up. I'd feel my neck muscles tighten. My face would get warm and my breathing would speed up. I tried not to show it. I tried to act normal, but it was hard to shake. One evening, I stayed up with a friend visiting from another part of town. We had some snacks and talked about random stuff. Around 11:45, I told him about the elevator thing. He chuckled and said, "Let's see if it happens tonight." I nodded, feeling a bit relieved I wouldn't be alone. Right at midnight, we both heard the ding. My friend looked at me, eyebrows raised. We walked to the door quietly. I opened it. The elevator was open, lights on, empty. My friend whispered, "What the hell?" I stood there, chest pounding. He moved forward like he wanted to step inside. I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I said, without really knowing why I felt so nervous about it. He shrugged, but he didn't go inside. We both stood there for a moment, staring at that empty car. Then it closed and went down. My friend's face was pale. He asked if this happened a lot. I nodded. He didn't laugh anymore. He looked uncomfortable. After that, I knew it wasn't my imagination. Someone else saw it. He tried to film it on his phone the next night, but it didn't come. He left 2 days later, and I was alone with the weird elevator again. I felt a little less crazy, but not any calmer. I started thinking about changing apartments. I didn't like feeling trapped with this nightly routine of waiting for a ghost elevator, but the place was convenient for work, and I had already signed a lease. I began ignoring the elevator. When midnight came, I'd go to bed early or put on headphones. Still, I'd catch myself glancing at the clock. I'd notice it was 12:03, and I'd feel my heart thump when I imagined the doors opening outside. Sometimes I heard it. Other times, I convinced myself I heard it. My mind was playing tricks on me. One night, I decided to confront it. I waited by the door around midnight. When the ding came, I swung the door open and stepped into the hallway. The elevator doors were open, the interior lit up. I walked forward. My breath felt shallow. I put one foot across the threshold and into the elevator. I wanted to see if anything would happen. The lights were steady. The floor was solid under my feet. I smelled a faint metallic scent, maybe from the old mechanisms. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stood there for a second. Nothing jumped out at me. No weird feeling except my own tension. I backed out quickly. The doors closed and the elevator moved down. I still don't know why it happens. Every midnight or close to it, that elevator arrives on my floor, opens up, and waits. Then it closes and leaves. The building manager can't explain it. The logs show nothing. The neighbors don't seem to experience it. It doesn't show up on video whenever I'm ready to record. But it keeps happening, almost as if it's part of the building's daily routine. A glitch that nobody can fix, or something else I can't understand. I've learned to live with it for now. I don't open the door anymore. I just listen for the ding and I wait until it's gone. It's creepy, but it hasn't hurt me. It's just a presence, like an uninvited visitor who shows up right on schedule. There's no explanation that I've found. There's no official record of a malfunction. The manager says everything's fine, but every night that elevator comes to greet me with its empty car, and I can't stop it. I'm hoping one day it'll just stop showing up. But until then, I live with it. I never expected to sit in my own home, late at night with my headphones on, feeling my stomach tighten because of a few faint whispers. That's what's happening right now. I'm on the second floor of my house, hunched over my small mixing console, staring at the waveform on my computer monitor. My heart is pounding. I feel a dull pressure at the back of my head. I don't want to take my headphones off because I'm scared I'll hear those voices in the empty air around me, instead of just through the headphones. But let me back up and explain how it all started. I live in a 2-story house on a quiet street. The houses around here have a lot of space between them. I don't really have next-door neighbors, more like houses that are a short drive away. That's one reason I chose this place. It's peaceful. I like to make music on the weekends, and my plan was to convert one of the larger upstairs bedrooms into a recording space. It has thick walls, and the structure seemed solid enough. I put in some basic acoustic foam panels, set up my desk, installed a better door, and laid some rugs on the floor to help with sound absorption. I'm not a professional musician, but I enjoy experimenting with guitar loops, drum machines, and vocal tracks when I get the time. In the beginning, everything felt normal. I'd record some basic guitar riffs or maybe some melodic lines. Then I'd sit back in my old swivel chair, put on my headphones, and listen to what I'd captured. Around midnight, I'd shut down everything and go to bed. That was my routine. I never noticed anything unusual. But about 3 months ago, after replaying one of my late-night recordings, I heard something strange. There was a brief moment, right after my final strum, where I could make out a faint whisper. It was so low that I thought maybe it was noise from the guitar amp or a loose cable. I ignored it, because random electrical noise can happen in home recordings. The next day I replaced a few cables and rearranged some cords behind my desk. I kept telling myself, it's just a matter of grounding or interference. I had no reason to suspect anything else. That weekend I recorded a short drum track using a sampler. Then I layered a bass line on top of it, and later that night, I listened to the entire track. The same low whisper came up again. This time, it lasted a bit longer, and I could pick out a slight rhythm in the whisper, as if it was matching the beat. It was hard to describe. It was more like a murmur. I felt a small chill, but I tried to keep calm. I reminded myself that digital equipment can pick up stray signals. Sometimes radio frequencies slip in. I used to live near a busy intersection, and I remember occasionally picking up signals from CB radios when I plugged in certain guitars or pedals. I thought it might be a similar issue. Still, I wanted to be sure. I went online, read about shielding cables, ground loops, preamp interference, and all sorts of technical stuff. I decided to swap out some older equipment. I bought a better audio interface, got new cables, even replaced my surge protector with a higher quality one. This wasn't cheap, but I wanted to fix the issue for good. Then I tested everything the following weekend. I recorded silence, just letting the mic run in the room while I sat quietly. Later I played it back. No whispers. I felt relieved. I concluded that the old cables or the old interface might have been the problem. However, that relief vanished the next time I made a real recording. I was trying out a simple chord progression on my acoustic guitar, plugged into a small DI box connected to my interface. The session was clean at first. When I listened back, the track sounded clear until I strummed the final note. As it faded, I heard a series of low murmurs. Each one seemed to fade in and out, like someone quietly repeating a phrase. My throat tightened. I played it again, leaning forward, trying to make sense of the sounds. It was definitely a voice, but I couldn't decipher any words. My eyes started to water. I wasn't crying, but my body felt tense. I rubbed my face and turned up the headphone volume, hoping I'd discover it was just another random noise. At that point, I reached out to a friend of mine who's a professional sound technician. We've known each other since college. He dropped by my place on a Wednesday night with his own laptop and some of his own gear. We tested my cables, microphones, interface settings, and even the electrical outlets. He didn't find anything unusual. We spent hours recording test signals, tapping on the mic, trying to recreate the weird whisper. Nothing showed up that night. He thought maybe I was mixing up low-level hiss with actual speech. I didn't push it. I figured that if he couldn't replicate it, I should just move on and hope it was a random glitch. He left around 1 a.m., and I felt a bit silly for making him check everything with me. A couple of weeks went by without any strange sounds. I was almost convinced that it had been some freak occurrence. Then, one Friday night, I decided to record a vocal track for a new song I was working on. It was just a rough scratch track. I like to play the chords on guitar, hum a melody, and then see if anything interesting pops up. So I recorded about 4 minutes of raw audio, messing around with a few notes. When I replayed it, my entire body tensed up. Underneath my voice, I could hear another whisper, almost responding to me whenever I paused between lines. It sounded like a breathy murmur that jumped in at the exact moments of silence. My hands started shaking. I turned off the playback right away. My mouth felt dry and my chest was tight. I sat there alone in front of the screen. The only sounds in the room were the faint hum of the computer fan and my own breathing. I wiped my palms on my jeans. Then I replayed the audio, skipping ahead to the parts where the whispers appeared. They matched the gaps in my vocal lines. I replayed that section over and over, trying to see if the murmur was my own voice or some echo effect. But it was definitely different in tone and rhythm. It was like someone was speaking into a mic from another room, but there was no one else in the house. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that faint murmur. I kept thinking about how it seemed to follow my melodies. I started questioning everything: the gear, the house, even my own hearing. But I knew what I heard. I wasn't imagining it. Over the next few days, I tried to ignore it. During the day, I told myself it was just a quirk of home recording. Maybe my friend's tests weren't complete. Maybe there was a weird frequency bouncing around, but deep down I felt uneasy. I started noticing small things around the house. The second floor felt colder than usual at night. Maybe it was just the air conditioning, but it felt odd. Sometimes the overhead light in my makeshift studio flickered when I first turned it on. It only lasted a second, but I found myself noticing it. I kept telling myself that houses have quirks. Lights flicker sometimes. Temperatures fluctuate. But I couldn't shake the tension in my gut. Then there was this one weekend where I decided to try a fresh approach. I set up my equipment early in the day with the curtains open, sunlight flooding the room. I recorded a few guitar tracks, played them back on the spot, and everything was fine. No whispers, no strange noises. Around midnight, I got the urge to capture a new idea. I turned on the lights, put on the headphones, and started playing a slow sequence of chords. As I played, I felt a slight buzz in my headphone mix, which made me pause. When I stopped playing, I heard the murmur again. It was short, maybe only a second or two, but it was right there. It sounded close, like someone was leaning in behind me, speaking directly into my ear. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I lifted the headphones off and spun around. The room was empty. I could feel a slight tremor in my legs and my pulse was racing. I decided to record again just in case. My heart pounded while I let the tape roll. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but I was on edge. After about a minute of silence, I stopped the recording. When I played it back, I heard a faint whisper at the end, trailing off. It sounded like it was fading into the walls. I had goosebumps all over my arms. My breathing was shallow. I couldn't get rid of the fear building in my chest. I started dreading my usual recording sessions. I used to look forward to them. Now, every time I plugged in my guitar or turned on the mic, I felt a tightness in my chest. I kept waiting to hear that soft voice. Each time it appeared, I felt the same jolt of adrenaline. My face would get hot, my throat would feel stiff, and I'd break into a cold sweat. I called my sound technician friend again. I told him what was happening. He came over one more time. He did a thorough check, including monitoring with his own headphones. We recorded some tracks together. Everything was silent. He teased me a bit, saying I might be overworked or stressed. I forced a laugh. I didn't want to sound paranoid. He left again, and I found myself alone in the house, still thinking about those murmurs. Eventually, I tried a different tactic. I stayed up until 3 a.m., running the recording software without actually playing anything. I wanted to see if the voices would show up by themselves. For the first hour, the recording was just dead air. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a soft, static crackle, followed by a low murmur. It was quieter than before, but it was there. I froze, staring at the waveform in real time. I could see a slight spike in the decibels. My breath caught in my throat. I stopped the recording, saved the file, and played it back. The whisper was there. I couldn't make it out, but it sent chills up my spine. That's where I am right now. It's late. I'm wearing my headphones, listening to silence on a loop, too nervous to record anything new. My legs feel restless, but I don't want to stand up. My palms are sweaty and my shoulders are stiff. Every small sound in the house makes me jump. I can hear the faint crackle of the air ducts, and each time I wonder if it's something else. I can't figure out the source of these whispers. I swapped all my cables and gear, upgraded my equipment, and had a sound technician friend check everything. There are no neighbors close enough for me to accidentally record them through thin walls. I know that audio interference can happen, but this is different. It feels targeted. It shows up when I'm playing or when I leave the mic running at night. There's no consistent pattern, but it's frequent enough to make me feel uneasy every time I press record. I feel silly talking about it because it sounds like I'm diving into ghost story territory, but I'm just a regular guy who loves making music in a quiet house. There's nothing dramatic about my life, yet here I am, anxious and uncertain because I keep picking up voices in my recordings that nobody can explain. I wish I had a neat explanation, but I don't. Right now, my strategy is to keep recording and see if I can gather enough evidence to show someone else. I don't even know what that would accomplish. Maybe if I play it for a few more experienced audio engineers, they can figure out if it's some obscure frequency phenomenon. Or maybe they'll hear what I hear and get creeped out just like I do. I'm still sitting here, headphones on, arms tense, scanning the waveform for more signs of activity. My eyes are sore from staring at the screen. The whisper hasn't shown up in the last 5 minutes, but I'm on edge, waiting. I don't know how I'm going to sleep after this. This is supposed to be my hobby, something that relaxes me. Now it's become a source of stress and dread. I'll keep trying to record new tracks. I'll keep an eye on my waveforms and check every odd spike. But if these voices continue, I might have to reconsider everything. My setup, my schedule, even my decision to keep recording in this house. For now, I'm just trying to control my breathing and keep my hands from shaking too much. The clock on my desk reads 3:47 a.m. The room is silent, but my heart is racing and I feel that dull ache in my chest again. Part of me wants to shut down my computer and pretend this isn't happening, but I can't walk away from it. I need to know what's going on, even if it keeps me up all night. And that's where I am. Eyes bloodshot, headphones clamped on my ears, waiting for the next whisper that sends a chill right through me. I never used to worry about odd noises in the night. I always assumed that if you hear a creak, it's the wind or the house settling. That changed a few weeks after I finished renovating my old family home. The place is a single-story house that belonged to my grandparents before it was passed down to me. It's not huge, but it has enough rooms to feel spacious, especially for someone living alone. I hired a contractor to knock down some walls, expand the living room, and upgrade the plumbing and electrical systems. It was loud and messy for a few months, but everything looked great once it was done. I felt pretty proud of the final result. Then things started happening. I'm a pretty organized guy and I like a certain order in my space. One night I finished watching a show around midnight. I turned off all the lights, did my usual check of the doors, and made sure each one was locked or closed. My bedroom is down a short hallway, near the bathroom and a small guest room. I normally keep the guest room door shut. There's no reason to leave it open. That night I clearly remember closing it before I went to sleep. I felt the latch click. Then I walked to my bedroom, shut my own door, and went to bed. I woke up to use the bathroom around 3 a.m. Everything was quiet. The hallway light was off, but I always keep a small night light in the bathroom so I can see where I'm going. When I stepped out into the hallway, I noticed a sliver of light from the guest room. I stopped. That door was wide open. I stood there for a moment, feeling a dull pressure in my chest. I know I closed it. I reached for the switch on the wall to confirm what I was seeing. The hallway light came on, and yes, the guest room door was open. Nothing else seemed out of place, though. I looked inside the guest room. Nobody was there. Nothing was on the floor. It just looked like a normal, empty space. I shrugged it off. Houses can do weird things sometimes, I guess. Maybe I didn't close it all the way. I pushed the door shut, heard it latch again, and went back to bed. It was unsettling, but I tried to forget about it. A few nights later, the same thing happened. This time I was sure I'd closed it. I felt the latch catch. There was no doubt in my mind. Still, when I got up for a glass of water at around 2 a.m., that door was open again. My heart was pounding as I approached it. I stood in the hallway for a solid minute, staring at the darkness beyond the doorway. I listened for any movement or breathing. I heard nothing, but I felt an odd tension in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid. I closed the door, jiggled the handle, and made absolutely sure it was firmly shut. Then I went back to bed. I had a hard time sleeping, though. My mind kept replaying the moment I found it open. During the day, the house felt normal. Sunlight came in through the windows, and all the rooms looked the way they should. I checked the door hinges. I'm not an expert, but they seemed fine. I didn't see any wobbling or misalignment. I decided to call the carpenter who installed all the doors during the renovation, a guy named Marco. He showed up a day later, walked around with his tools, tightened a few screws, and told me nothing was wrong. Everything was level, the hinges were correct, and he saw no reason for any door to open by itself. He even tested the latch multiple times. It didn't pop open on its own. He left, and I felt a little silly. Maybe I'd been ignoring some detail. Maybe I forgot to shut the door, or maybe I was half asleep when I closed it. That's what I told myself. The third time it happened was around 3:15 in the morning. The guest room door was open again, but now the bathroom door was ajar too. Both doors were slightly open, as if someone had walked through them. I remember my throat feeling tight, and I was breathing faster than normal. I checked all the windows in the house. They were locked. The front and back doors were locked as well. No sign of forced entry. Nothing was missing. I tried to calm down by washing my face in the bathroom sink. The cold water felt jarring. I stared at my own reflection, wondering if I was losing my mind. I went back to the doors, shut them carefully, and tried to sleep. It took me hours to drift off. The slightest sound in the house made me sit up in bed and listen. Every small creak felt like a warning. The noises started a week later. It wasn't every night, but often enough to freak me out. I'd be in bed trying to fall asleep, and I'd hear a soft tapping on the door. It was gentle, like someone lightly pushing on the wood with their fingertips. At first, I thought it was the air conditioner or maybe some pipe rattling in the wall. But whenever I got up and put my ear to the door, the tapping would stop. Then sometimes I could feel a faint vibration through the wood, a brief tremor lasting a few seconds, then disappearing. My scalp would prickle and a hot wave of adrenaline would surge through my body. I'd stand there, barefoot, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. I'd open the door fast, trying to catch something, but every time, the hallway was empty. I'd flip the lights on, look around, check the other rooms, and find nothing. No footprints, no clues, just an open space. One night, I tried staying up on purpose. I kept the hallway light off and waited in my living room with the TV on mute. I left the guest room door shut, latched and locked from the inside. I wanted to see if it would move on its own. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard a faint creaking. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me jump. I paused the show I was watching and listened. The noise seemed to come from the hallway, so I got up carefully and tiptoed over to the corner. I couldn't see the door from there, so I moved slowly, trying not to breathe too loudly. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Once I turned the corner, I froze. The guest room door was still shut, but I saw the handle move slightly, like someone was touching it. It didn't turn all the way, but it shifted enough that I could see it jiggle. I felt this tightness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. Then the handle stopped moving. I stared for a long moment. It was completely still. I stepped forward, reached for the handle, and opened the door quickly. The room was empty. My pulse was racing, and I felt a thin layer of sweat on my forehead. I walked inside, turned on the lamp, and looked around. The closet was empty. The windows were locked. The air was stale and smelled faintly of old paint, which still lingered from the renovation. I stayed there listening to my own breathing, but I didn't hear anything else. Eventually, I turned off the lamp and left, shutting the door behind me. When I went back to the living room, I realized I was trembling. My hands shook, and my mouth felt dry. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, took a few sips, and tried to calm myself. The rest of that night, I didn't sleep much. The next day, I decided to inspect every inch of that door. I took a small flashlight and checked the hinges closely. They were tight, with no cracks in the wood. The latch clicked and stayed in place. I looked at the door frame and the floor near the door, searching for any sign of warping or misalignment. It all seemed fine. I even took out a level to see if the frame was slightly off, but everything was straight. I then checked the bathroom door and the other interior doors. No obvious issues. I felt stupid standing there with a flashlight, measuring tools, and a worried look on my face. But I had to do something. At that point, I was half convinced I was dealing with some leftover effect of the renovation, but there was no sign of that. Nighttime got worse. Sometimes I'd be lying in bed trying to read, and I'd hear gentle knocks on the hallway walls. They weren't loud, but they were rhythmic enough that I couldn't ignore them. I'd put the book down, call out something like, "Hello?" and wait. No answer. I'd listen harder. Occasionally, I'd catch a faint scuffling sound, as if someone lightly dragged a hand across the wall. Then silence again. It made my scalp tingle with nerves. My mouth would go dry, and I'd feel a slight shaking in my limbs. I'd get up, open my bedroom door, and peek into the hallway. Sometimes it was empty. Other times I'd see one of the doors slightly open that I knew I had closed. I'd stand there unsure if I wanted to walk forward or slam my door shut and lock myself in. I usually forced myself to check. I'd move slowly, flipping lights on as I went. But I never found anything. The moment I'd open a door to look, the noise stopped. After a particularly tense night, I decided to talk to a friend of mine who used to be a security guard. He asked if I'd seen any footprints outside or if I had an alarm system. I told him the property was fenced, the windows had secure locks, and I had motion-activated lights outside. Nobody could walk around without me noticing. He suggested I install some security cameras inside, if only to catch any intruder or see what was going on at night. The idea sounded logical. I bought a couple of indoor cameras that connect to my phone. I set them up in the hallway, pointing at the guest room door and the bathroom door. I also placed one in the living room just in case. That first night with the cameras, I felt a bit more at ease. The blinking little lights on them gave me some sense of control. I turned off the hallway light, closed both doors, and locked them from the inside as usual. Then I sat in bed with my phone next to me, waiting to see if I'd get any motion alerts. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint click from the hallway, followed by a soft creak. My stomach twisted and I grabbed my phone. No alert showed up. I checked the live feed anyway. The cameras were still showing the empty hallway. Nothing was moving in the frame. My brows furrowed and I listened again. The noise was gone. I carefully got up, opened my bedroom door, and looked out. The bathroom door was open just a crack. The guest room door was still shut. The camera, which was pointed right there, hadn't picked up any movement. I stepped forward, shining my phone's flashlight on the door. It was open about an inch. I could see the bathroom tile glinting in the light. I moved into the hallway, checking the camera. The feed was working. For some reason, it hadn't triggered a recording. I pushed the bathroom door open the rest of the way. The room was dark and empty. I felt a chill run through my body as I stepped inside, half expecting someone to be hiding behind the shower curtain. Nothing. I looked around, switched on the light, and found myself alone. My legs felt shaky, and my mouth was tense. I finally returned to the hallway, shut the door, and adjusted the camera angle. I didn't sleep much after that. Over the next few days, it was the same pattern. Doors opening when I was sure they were closed. Soft knocking, gentle taps, a faint vibration in the wood when I pressed my ear against it. Every time I tried to catch it on camera, I ended up with no solid evidence. The cameras would show me walking around, opening doors, or shining a flashlight, but never actually captured the door in motion by itself. It was driving me crazy. I double-checked all the camera settings, tested them during the day, and made sure they recorded motion when I walked by. They worked perfectly. At night, it just wouldn't register these subtle events. I started noticing the time pattern. It often happened between 2 and 3 a.m., sometimes as late as 3:30. During the day, I heard no strange noises at all. The doors stayed shut if I closed them. Nothing rattled. If it were temperature changes or something related to humidity, why did it happen only in the early hours? Why not during hot afternoons? I thought about calling the carpenter again, but I knew he'd give me the same answer. Everything was fine, physically. This wasn't a mechanical issue with the hinges or the latches. I'm at a point now where I just accept it's going to happen. I try to sleep, but if I hear something, I get up with a quick jolt of adrenaline. My arms feel tense, and I can feel my heart racing every time I walk into the hallway to check. Sometimes the tapping on the wood is so soft, I wonder if I'm imagining it. Other times, it's clear enough that I can't deny it's real. I've never actually seen anyone in my house at night, and there's no sign of a break-in. In the morning, everything is normal. The only clue is that the doors I shut are sometimes found open. It's not the kind of thing that's easy to explain to people. They either think I'm messing with them or I'm paranoid. But I'm telling you, it's happening. I live alone, and I'm absolutely certain I lock those doors. I'm hyper-aware of it now. I've tested the locks, replaced them, and it still happens. There's no logical explanation. I've spent too many nights trying to catch it in the act and failing. It's real, but I can't prove it. It doesn't help that I hear those faint vibrations when I press my ear against the door. It feels like something is gently pushing or tapping from the other side. But the moment I open it, there's nothing there. I don't know if it's connected to the renovation or if I'm just noticing it more because everything is new and different. Could be the new materials expanding and contracting in the middle of the night. Could be a fluke. But the carpenter says there's no problem with the doors. That leaves me with more questions than answers. All I know is that it keeps happening, and I can't shake this uneasy feeling every night. I dread waking up and seeing another door open that I know I closed. I keep telling myself there must be some rational explanation. Maybe I missed some minute gap in the frame. Maybe air pressure from the AC is forcing the door to move. But then I remember how the latch feels when it clicks, and I can't see how airflow could unlatch it. The house is solid. Everything is newly installed. It's driving me up the wall, and I can't stop it. For now, I live with it. I still get sweaty palms when I walk down that hallway at night. Sometimes I try to ignore the sounds, but curiosity and fear always push me to check. I open doors that should be locked, expecting to find something, but I never do. I just find an empty space. That's where I stand now. I lock my doors, I check them, I watch them, and they open on their own between 2 and 3 in the morning. I hear taps, feel vibrations, and then see nothing. It's creepy, and I can't explain it. But it's real, and every time it happens, I get that same rush of fear all over again. wondering if one day I'll finally open a door and see something looking back at me. For now, that hasn't happened. I'm left with a nighttime routine filled with tension and a morning filled with relief. Yet every evening when the sun goes down, I remember those taps, those clicking sounds, and those open doors that shouldn't be open. And I wait, unsure if it will ever stop. I jolted awake at 2 a.m. because of those footsteps again. They were heavy, like a solid shoe hitting concrete with force. I wasn't dreaming. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs. I looked at the thin glow of my bedside clock and felt a spike of adrenaline. It was always the same time. My loft was dark except for a faint streetlight glow that came through the narrow window. I heard the steps outside in the alley, back and forth, steady, unhurried. It felt wrong because that alley is a dead end. There isn't anywhere to go. But those steps kept pacing like someone was stuck in an endless routine. I couldn't see anyone from my window, but the sound was too clear to ignore. It made me sit there, my breath short, my ears straining to catch every detail. That was the moment I knew this wasn't my imagination. I moved to this small loft near my workplace about a month ago. It's a simple space with one large room and a small bathroom tucked in the corner. The walls are plain white, and I keep only what I need. A small couch, a table, one chair, a decent bed, and a few kitchen items. I wanted to be closer to my office, so I picked this building because it's close enough to walk. The neighborhood seems normal. During the day, it's busy. People come in and out of the shops. There's a cafe down the street and a pharmacy on the corner. At night, everything shuts down and the place feels deserted. That's why I thought it was perfect. Quiet, no traffic, just a straight shot to the office. In the back of the building, there's a narrow alley that leads nowhere. It's walled off at the end with old bricks. There's a single street light that hits part of the alley, but most of it stays dark. I noticed it on my first day here. The real estate agent mentioned it was a dead end, but didn't say anything else. I never gave it much thought until my first weekend in the loft. I was lying in bed drifting off when I heard strong footsteps outside. I assumed it was someone walking home late from a bar or something. Then I realized it was 2 a.m. on a Saturday, but the steps didn't go away. They kept going back and forth. I got up and peeked out the window. I didn't see anyone. I kept looking, convinced I'd spot a shape or a shadow. The footsteps sounded too real to be some trick of my mind. But I saw nothing. The next morning I felt uneasy. I went downstairs and spoke with one of the doormen. I asked if he heard strange footsteps at night. He gave me a slow nod. "Yeah, sometimes I hear it," he said. "I've gone to check a few times, but there's never anyone there. It's weird. I've told the supervisor, but there's not much we can do if no one's there." He didn't seem too spooked, but he admitted it was odd. Another doorman chimed in. "It's always around the same time, right? I've heard it too." I felt a cold sensation in my stomach. I had hoped they'd say it was just a neighbor or something normal, but the fact they also found it strange made me more uneasy. That night I forced myself to stay up until 2 a.m. I kept the lights off, sat by the window and waited. I couldn't see much outside except a slice of the alley below. The air in my loft felt stale. I could hear my own breath. I checked the time on my phone every few seconds. Right at 2:02 a.m., I heard the footsteps start. They were sharp, almost rhythmic, and they moved from one end of the alley to the other. Then they turned around and went back. I followed the sound with my eyes. I tried to align it with what I would see if someone were actually down there. But there was no one. My palms got sweaty, and my heart rate skyrocketed. I felt a strong urge to call someone or run outside, but I also felt rooted in place. I couldn't believe it was happening. I decided to head down to the lobby while the noise was still going. I slipped on some sweatpants and shoes, grabbed my phone and rushed to the elevator. My chest was tight with anxiety. I wondered if I'd open the door to the alley and finally catch whoever was there. When I got downstairs, the doorman on duty was an older guy who worked nights. I asked if he heard anything. He nodded. "Yeah, I hear it right now," he said, looking uneasy. "But trust me, if you go out there, you won't see anything." I still wanted to check. He unlocked the side door that leads into the alley. I stepped outside. The air was cold, and the space smelled like damp concrete. I heard nothing the moment I crossed the threshold. The footsteps just stopped. The doorman followed me out, shining his flashlight around. There was nothing there except a few trash bins and the brick wall at the end. We walked all the way to the wall, looked behind the bins, and even tried to see if there was some hidden door or escape route. It was a dead end. No one could hide there. No gates or doors, just a solid brick wall. I shrugged at him. "Maybe it's in the walls." He shook his head. "I've worked here long enough to know there's no secret passage. Let's go back inside." After that, I felt uncomfortable in my own place. I still tried to maintain my normal routine. I'd wake up early, shower, make coffee, and leave for the office on foot. Work was busy, so I didn't think about the footsteps too much during the day. But as the night came closer, I felt a tightness in my chest, anticipating that 2 a.m. moment. I tried wearing headphones to block the sound. I cranked up music or podcasts. But at 2 a.m., I still sensed the footsteps. Sometimes I removed my headphones and listened. They were there, steady, always going back and forth until around 2:30 a.m., then fading away like nothing happened. One night I texted a friend about it. He joked that I should record the sound. So I set my phone's voice recorder near the window at 1:50 a.m. I left it running until 2:30 a.m. Later, I played it back. I heard the footsteps loud and clear. My friend listened and said it definitely sounded like someone walking on concrete, but he laughed it off. He said it could be pipes or some weird echo from the street. I invited him to stay over and see for himself. He politely declined, laughing, but I could tell he was uneasy. I started checking the outside of the building during daylight. I wanted to see if there was something about the design that might create an echo. There's a tall building next to ours, and the alley runs between them, ending at that brick wall. There aren't any windows directly facing the alley except for the ones on the upper floors of our building. The other building's wall is blank. No doors, no windows. It felt solid. I walked the entire length of that wall, tapping on it to see if it was hollow. It wasn't. I talked to some neighbors on other floors, but most of them said they either slept through the night or didn't pay attention. A few said they had heard the sound once or twice, but never gave it much thought. I got frustrated because I felt like I was the only one who cared enough to figure it out. Over the next couple of weeks, I tried a new strategy. I stayed awake every night before 2 a.m. and turned off all the lights. I stood by the window and looked down. My heart would start racing around 1:55 a.m., anticipating the first step. Then around 2 a.m., I'd hear it. I'd see absolutely nothing in the alley. No shape, no movement, just the faint light from the street lamp. The footsteps sounded so real, though. My hands would tremble sometimes. I'd feel goosebumps on my arms and the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My mouth got dry. I kept trying to rationalize it, but it never made sense. The sound was too crisp to be some random building noise. It clearly moved in a line, stopping at the end of the alley, then turning around. One night, I thought about stepping into the alley right before 2 a.m. to see if I could catch it in person. I went downstairs. The doorman was curious about what I was up to. I said I just wanted to check something out. He unlocked the side door, and I walked into the alley at 1:55 a.m. The environment felt heavy. My heart was beating hard. The smell of wet concrete was strong. I could see the brick wall at the end. There was a dim glow from the streetlight, but most of the alley was in shadow. I stood there, waiting, my back against the building. I had my phone in my hand, ready to record video or at least audio. Time ticked by. 1:58, 1:59, 2 hour. I held my breath, waiting. Silence. The only sound I heard was a distant car passing on the main street. I waited another 5 minutes. Nothing. No steps. I went back inside, feeling foolish. I rode the elevator to my loft. The moment I shut my door, I heard the footsteps start outside. I almost dropped my phone. I ran to the window and there they were, steady, clear, back and forth. My hands shook as I gripped the windowsill. I started to sweat. I didn't understand how they could appear the second I came back up. The next day, I talked to the doorman again. He just shrugged. It's been happening for a while, from what I know. Some people say they've heard it. Others think it's just a weird echo. He didn't have an explanation. I called the building's management. They said they had no official complaints about it, so they didn't see any reason to investigate further. That annoyed me, but I had no solid evidence to force them to do anything. All I had was a strange audio recording. Eventually, my nights became tense. Every evening around bedtime, I'd think about the footsteps. My stomach would knot, and I'd feel on edge. Sometimes I'd stay awake until after 2:30 a.m., just so I wouldn't be jolted awake by the steps. I'd lie there, listening to them, trying to guess where the invisible walker might be. I'd look at my phone's screen, waiting for the time to pass. The footsteps always ended around 2:30, give or take a few minutes. After that, I could sleep, but it wasn't restful. I tried talking to a neighbor across the hall. His name is Roberto. He's around my age and works from home. He said he heard the steps once but assumed it was someone from the building next door. When I told him about the alley being sealed off, he looked uncomfortable. He said, "I guess I don't know, man. Maybe some homeless guy sneaks in." I explained there was nowhere to hide. He said he didn't want to dwell on it. He looked at me like I was stirring up trouble. After another night of lost sleep, I decided to record a video at my window. I propped my phone on the sill, pointed it down at the alley, and hit record at 1:50 a.m. I made sure the lens was aimed where the footsteps should appear if someone was really there. Then I sat at my table, waiting. I tried not to move or make noise. I could feel my heart pounding. At 2:02 a.m., the footsteps started. I stared at the camera, hoping it would catch something. I even whispered, "Come on, show me something," under my breath. By 2:25 a.m., the footsteps stopped. I reviewed the footage. The audio picked up the steps loud and clear, but the video showed an empty alley. No movement, no shadow, nothing that could explain the noise. I felt a deep frustration. I didn't want to move out just because of some bizarre footsteps, but my sleep schedule was destroyed. Every night I'd feel dread as the clock approached 2 a.m. I tried earplugs, music, white noise machines. Nothing helped. The sound cut through everything. Sometimes I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still feel it somehow, like a vibration in my gut. One night, I decided I couldn't just sit there anymore. I waited until 2:10 a.m., put on my jacket, and rushed downstairs. My pulse was hammering. I knew the footsteps were happening right then. I could hear them before I even stepped into the elevator. They seemed even louder. The doorman was standing there looking at me. I walked outside without a word and stood by the entrance of the alley. Nothing. No steps. It was quiet. I waved to him to indicate I was going deeper in. He shook his head but didn't stop me. I took slow steps into the darkness, shining my phone's flashlight on the ground. The concrete was damp. I saw a few small puddles. There was no sign of footprints or wet shoe marks. The footsteps had sounded so real moments before, but now it felt like I was standing in an empty space. I stayed there for a minute, my breathing uneven. Then I turned around and looked up at my own window. I could see a faint light, probably from my bedroom lamp. I didn't see anyone looking out, obviously, but my mind was racing. How could I hear something so loud and yet see nothing? I walked back inside, feeling the tension in my shoulders. The doorman just gave me this resigned shrug. Neither of us said anything. The footsteps didn't stop over the following weeks. Every single night, 2 a.m. to about 2:30 a.m., the same pattern. Even when I had a friend crash on my couch for a few nights, the footsteps were there, but my friend slept through them. He's a heavy sleeper, so he didn't notice anything. He believed me when I played the recording, but it didn't affect him the same way. He went home after 2 nights saying he wished he could help me. but he didn't have any ideas. That left me alone with the nightly disturbance. Now I just accept it as part of living here. I can't explain it. The doorman can't explain it. The management doesn't care, and the neighbors don't seem concerned. The footsteps come at 2 a.m. They continue for about half an hour. They sound like heavy shoes pacing up and down the alley. You can't see who or what is making them. If you go down to check, they vanish, only to start again when you're back upstairs. It's like a routine that won't break. I've even tried leaving my loft at random times of the night to catch them off guard, but it never works. I'm still here, and every night I feel that rush of anxiety when I see the clock approach 2 a.m. I've stopped trying to solve it. I don't know if it's a person with an impossible trick, some weird acoustic anomaly, or something I can't wrap my head around. All I know is the footsteps are real enough for me to hear and record, and no one has given me a solid explanation. It's part of my routine now. I stare at the dark window, hear the steps, and wait for them to stop. After about 30 minutes, they fade, and I finally get some rest. I still live here. I still go to work in the morning. That's the story. No matter how hard I try, I can't make those footsteps go away. And every time I hear them, my heart still pounds, and I still look over my shoulder, hoping for some sign of a person. But there's nothing. That's it. That's what happens every single night, and I'm stuck with it. I never expected a simple warehouse rental to turn into the most unsettling experience of my life. I needed extra space for my construction materials and tools, and I wanted somewhere to work on my weekend projects without worrying about noise or clutter. It was a practical decision. During the day, the place felt ordinary, just a big, empty building with shelves and storage units. But at night, everything changed. I signed the lease about 3 months ago. The landlord seemed like an honest guy. He said the warehouse was solid, and he'd never had problems with previous tenants. The price was fair. The location was decent, about 15 minutes from my house. On my first visit, I noticed the main entrance was a wide metal door with a thick padlock and a rolling shutter. There was one corridor that led to several rows of tall steel shelves. Each shelf was about 7 feet high, and they were arranged in parallel lines, leaving narrow aisles between them. I remember the first day I brought my stuff in. It was a Saturday morning. I drove my pickup truck into the parking area, unlocked the warehouse, and started hauling in the materials. I had bags of cement, boxes of nails, heavy-duty power tools, extension cords, and a few wooden planks. Everything felt routine. The interior lights came on with a dull hum when I flipped the switch by the door. They were fluorescent lights mounted high on the ceiling, giving everything a slightly cold look. But that didn't bother me. It was just a big concrete space with metal shelves, nothing more. I set up my tools in a corner. I placed some scrap wood on one shelf and arranged my bags of cement on the floor, close to the entrance. I was planning to come back the next day to begin a small woodworking project. I spent a couple of hours there drilling a few holes, checking for stable spots and seeing if there was enough ventilation. I didn't notice anything unusual. When I locked up that afternoon, the place felt normal. My first hint of anything strange happened about a week later. I had just finished dinner and realized I left a box of nails in my truck instead of bringing it inside. I thought, no big deal, I'll just stop by the warehouse. It was around 8 p.m., and so the sun was already gone. I arrived at the warehouse, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The light switch was right by the entrance. As soon as I flipped it, I heard a faint clinking sound somewhere toward the back. It was a short metallic noise, like something tapping against a shelf. I paused for a moment, listened carefully, and then heard nothing else. I told myself it could have been some piece of metal expanding or contracting, maybe something shifting on a shelf. I brushed it off. I walked to the shelf where I store my nails, placed the new box there, and did a quick check on my tools. Everything was in order. While I was leaving, I heard a squeak. I turned around thinking I might have missed a loose hinge or maybe a rod leaning against something. Again, silence. I shrugged it off and went home. The next weekend, I decided to work on a small bench I wanted to build. I arrived at the warehouse around 10 a.m. I set up my saw, measured some wood, and spent the whole day cutting and sanding. I left around 6 p.m., and I felt satisfied with the progress. I had been there all day. No strange sounds. No odd feelings. It was a perfectly normal work session. That same night, around 9 p.m., I realized I left one of my expensive power tools out in the open. I prefer to lock away pricey equipment in a cabinet, just in case. So I headed back to the warehouse. When I got there, the parking lot was almost dark, with only a single street lamp on the corner. The air felt cooler than usual. I parked, grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, and went in. I turned on the warehouse lights. They flickered before staying on. That's when I heard it again, a metallic scraping sound somewhere deep between the rows of shelves. It sounded like someone was dragging a chain across the concrete floor, slowly for just a few seconds. I froze. My heart pounded. I held my breath and listened. The sound stopped. I tried to calm down by telling myself it was just the building settling or something shifting on a shelf. I walked over to the cabinet where I keep my drill. I opened it, put the power tool inside, locked it, and tried not to think about the noise. As I headed back to the door, I heard it again, only louder. I stopped in my tracks. The scraping was coming from the third row of shelves. I turned my flashlight in that direction, but all I saw was the fluorescent light hitting the metal frames. No movement, no shadows. But the sound was there, clear as day, like someone dragging a metal rod or chain across the floor. My stomach tightened. My mouth went dry. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" I got no response. I wanted to be rational. I walked slowly down the third row, checking each shelf. I didn't see anything unusual. The shelves were sturdy, and I didn't see any loose parts that could move on their own. I looked at the floor to see if there was any piece of metal lying around, but nothing. After a few minutes of searching, the sound had completely stopped. I left in a hurry, locked the door, and drove home. I remember feeling uneasy the whole night, thinking about what could have made that noise. A few days later, I had to unload some new bags of cement, so I called a friend, Marcos, to help me out. I wanted to get it done in the evening because I couldn't leave work early. Marcos met me at my house around 7 p.m., and we drove over together. I told him about the strange sounds, but he just laughed and said it was probably a loose gate or a metal bracket vibrating with the wind. I felt a bit foolish for worrying, but I was also glad to have someone else there. We arrived, unlocked the door, and turned on the lights. Everything looked fine. The shelves were in place, the floor was clean, and the air felt normal. We carried the first 2 bags of cement inside. While we were stacking the second bag, we both stopped because we heard that scraping noise again. It was loud enough for both of us to hear at the same time. Marcos looked at me and said, "That's definitely metal. You sure there's no side door that's loose?" I pointed to the walls. There's only one main door. Everything else is sealed or locked. We put the bags down. Marcos pulled out his phone and switched on the flashlight function. We moved slowly toward the far aisle, where the sound had come from. Our footsteps echoed. We were both tense. My palms started sweating. I felt my heart racing, like I was expecting something to jump out at us. When we reached the spot, there was silence. Marcos shone his light on the floor, on the shelves, on the walls. Nothing was out of place. We stood there for about a minute listening. No scraping, no squeaking. We both tried tapping the shelves, kicking the floor, but we couldn't replicate that noise. Marcos looked at me and said, "It's quiet now. Maybe it's a loose overhead fixture." We looked up at the lights. They seemed secure. The place was dead quiet. We walked away, heading back to the entrance. As soon as we reached the main door, the scraping started again. This time it was more insistent, like a slow drag of metal on concrete, then a pause, then another drag. Marcos and I looked at each other, and I felt goosebumps all over my arms. He muttered, "This is not normal." I felt a knot in my stomach. We both turned around and the sound stopped immediately. We waited for a few seconds, not sure if we should go back or just leave. I felt this urge to get out of there, My breath felt shallow, and my hands were cold. Marco said, "Let's just check one more time." So we walked back toward the corridor. Again, silence. No movement, no clanking, no scraping. The shelves stood there, solid as ever. I nudged one with my foot. It didn't budge. Marcos and I looked at each other, both frustrated and uneasy. We turned to leave. As soon as we headed for the door, the sound started again, loud and constant. It echoed through the aisles like someone was dragging a heavy chain across the floor. We both jerked to a stop. Marcos cursed under his breath. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. My whole body tensed up. I looked around, trying to pinpoint the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. That was the moment I decided I'd had enough. I told Marcos, "Let's get out of here." He agreed without hesitation. We practically ran to the truck. I locked the warehouse door so fast I almost dropped the key. When we got into the truck, we just sat there for a moment, breathing heavily. Marcos shook his head and said, "I don't know what that is, but I'm not coming back here at night." I nodded. My mind was racing with explanations, but none of them made complete sense. Could it be pipes in the walls? But the noise was too harsh and deliberate. Could it be an animal? But it sounded metallic, and it echoed in a very specific way. It felt like it was following us or reacting to our presence. That unsettled me more than anything. Over the next few days, I went during the daytime to check on my stuff. Everything was normal. The noise never happened while the sun was up. The shelves were intact. My materials and tools were exactly where I left them. There was no sign of trespassing, and the locks were secure. I even inspected the walls to see if there were hidden vents or something that could cause strange sounds at night. I found nothing. I tried talking to the landlord about it. He acted surprised. He said he never heard about any weird noises or problems. He told me I could break the lease if I wanted, but I'd lose my deposit. I didn't want to throw away my money, so I decided I'd just avoid going there alone at night. That seemed like the easiest solution, but my friend Marcos refused to go with me again after dark. He joked about it, but I knew he was genuinely uneasy. I didn't blame him. Sometimes I try to rationalize it. The building is made of steel and concrete, so maybe temperature changes cause some expansion or contraction at night, leading to noises. But that doesn't explain why it always sounds like it's coming from the same corridor, or why it seems to start and stop when I move. Maybe there's some structural quirk I haven't noticed. I've considered installing a few cameras with audio recorders to see if I can catch the sound, but I haven't done it yet. I still use the warehouse for my projects, but I only go there in the morning or afternoon. If I can't make it before sunset, I don't go at all. I don't want to face that sound again, especially not alone. It's embarrassing, but I can't shake off the feeling that there's something off about that place at night. Marcos still teases me, but whenever I suggest a nighttime trip, he just says, "No thanks." I've gotten pretty good at scheduling my trips so I can avoid being there after dark. I haven't heard the noise in a few weeks now. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, but I know what I heard, and so does Marcos. I keep hoping for a simple explanation, like a loose pipe or an electrical issue, but I haven't found any proof of that. There's no dramatic ending to this story, no big reveal. Nothing has jumped out at me, and I haven't seen any people or animals lurking around the shelves. Still, when I think back to the way that scraping metal sound followed us up and down the aisle, it makes my skin crawl. It was real enough to make two grown men drop everything and leave. I can't deny that. I also can't explain it. That's the situation. It's just a warehouse I rented for a practical reason, and during the day it's the most ordinary place in the world. But at night, there's that unexplainable scraping noise that comes and goes. I don't know where it originates, and I don't know why it seems to react to our movements. All I know is it's there, and I'm not interested in going back in after dark to figure it out. If that makes me a coward, so be it. I'd rather feel safe. For now, I keep my distance after sunset and try to forget about the unsettling sound that still lingers in my head. I stepped into that beachside rental on my first Friday evening, expecting nothing more than a quiet place to unwind after a long work week. The listing had shown a cozy one-bedroom layout connected to another similar unit by a thick shared wall. The ad promised peace, privacy, and easy access to the ocean. I liked the idea of grabbing my backpack, driving a couple of hours, and escaping the city noise. I wasn't hunting for excitement. I just wanted to walk on the sand, breathe the sea air, and get away from the constant stress at home. But on my very first night, I noticed something strange about the place that wouldn't let me rest. The house had its own tiny porch facing a narrow paved street that led straight down to the beach. There was a small living room furnished with an old couch and a low coffee table. The kitchen sat to the right, with a fridge and a couple of cabinets. Everything looked standard. White walls, tile floors, some paint chipping on the edges of the windows. I wasn't expecting luxury. It was just a typical coastal rental. The bedroom was in the back, with a sturdy bed, a small wardrobe, and enough space for a fan in the corner. The bathroom was next to it, clean enough, stocked with towels. Nothing looked off or suspicious. After I arrived and threw my bag on the couch, I headed out to grab groceries. The small local market was about half a mile away, so I walked. The breeze felt good, and I could smell the ocean drifting through the neighborhood. By the time I got back, the sun was setting. Inside the rental, the air felt stuffy, so I closed the door and switched on the overhead fan in the living room. As I did, I smelled something sweet and strong, like fresh flowers. It surprised me because I hadn't noticed any fragrance earlier. I glanced around, thinking maybe there were some air fresheners hidden, but I didn't see any. I figured it might be a cleaning product that the owner or the cleaning crew used before my arrival. Maybe they used a strong floral-scented disinfectant on the floors. It was a bit intense, but not unbearable. I unloaded the groceries, made a quick dinner, and sat down to watch something on my phone. The smell never faded, but it also didn't get stronger. It just lingered in the background. The next day, I woke up early and went to the beach. I spent most of the afternoon there, letting the sun and salt water wash away my worries. When I got back around sunset, I stepped inside and that same floral smell hit me in the face. This time, it felt stronger than before. It was almost cloying, like I'd stuck my nose into a bouquet of lilies. My eyes watered for a second. I opened the windows to let some fresh air in. Even though I had left the windows shut while I was gone, I wondered if there was some weird draft pulling in scents from the neighbor's side. I knew the units were attached, but the walls were thick, and I doubted the smell could pass through that easily. Still, it was the only explanation I had. At that point, I hadn't seen anyone next door. When I arrived, the neighbor's windows had their shutters partly drawn, and there were no lights on. At night, I noticed the same emptiness. No car in the driveway. No sign of movement. It was like nobody was there. I assumed it was just vacant during the off-season, which was why it was so quiet. The real estate agent had mentioned the neighbor owned the place, but only used it occasionally, so I didn't think much of it. The strong floral smell remained a puzzle, but I brushed it off as some leftover cleaning agent. Over the following weekends, the routine stayed the same. I'd pack up my bag, drive down, drop my stuff, and go straight to the beach. When I came back in the late afternoon, I'd noticed that same potent aroma filling the living room. I checked for hidden air freshener devices. I looked behind the couch, under the table, even inspected the vents in the kitchen. Nothing. The scent had no obvious source. There were no flowers in a vase, no scented candles, no incense sticks. There wasn't even a locked cupboard I couldn't open. Everything was in plain sight. The smell also seemed to vanish after a while. If I stayed home in the early evening, it would linger for maybe 20 or 30 minutes, then it would fade out. It didn't taper off gradually. It was there, and then it was gone. One Saturday, I finally spotted the neighbor. I heard a car engine outside, and I looked through the window to see a gray sedan pulling into the adjacent driveway. A tall, thin man got out. He moved quickly, glancing around like he didn't want to be seen. He pulled a small suitcase from the trunk, carried it inside, and shut the door. No wave, no greeting. He seemed too focused on his own task to notice me. I wasn't going to force a conversation. I assumed he just wanted privacy. Still, I felt a bit relieved knowing the place wasn't abandoned. That night, I went to bed around midnight. I was reading a book with the bedroom window open to catch the ocean breeze. Everything seemed calm until I heard a thump on the shared wall. It wasn't loud enough to be alarming, but it was unexpected. My neighbor might have been moving furniture or dropping something heavy. I paid attention, expecting more noise, but nothing else happened. After a few minutes, I drifted off to sleep. Around 3 a.m, I woke up needing a glass of water. I walked to the kitchen, keeping the lights off so I wouldn't fully jolt myself awake. As I passed through the living room, I noticed a strong burst of that floral scent. It was so intense that I actually paused. It felt like someone had sprayed perfume in the air moments ago. I turned on the lamp near the couch and looked around. No sign of anything unusual. The windows were closed, there was no one in the room. I was too tired to dwell on it, so I just gulped some water, went back to bed, and dozed off again. The next morning, the neighbor's car was gone. I guess he had left early. That pattern kept happening. I'd see him arrive late on a Friday or Saturday, stay 1 or 2 nights, and then leave before dawn. We never exchanged words. I'd just catch glimpses of him entering or exiting. He was like a ghost. Then came the weekend when things took a turn that still makes me uneasy. I'd had a busy Saturday on the beach with some local friends. We surfed, had lunch, walked around, and I got back to the rental after sundown. When I walked in, the floral smell smacked me hard. My eyes watered again. My chest felt tight. I set down my bag and switched on the overhead light. As I was about to turn on the ceiling fan, I froze. I heard a soft voice. It sounded like someone whispering in the living room. My heart hammered in my chest. I listened more closely, but the whisper was so faint that I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like a quiet chant, or someone reciting lines in a low tone. I thought maybe the TV was on next door, or the neighbor had a radio on. But it seemed to come from inside my space, right behind the couch. I crept closer, my feet silent on the tile. The whispering continued, steady and calm, then paused. I flipped the corner lamp on and stepped around the couch. No one was there. My living room was empty. I checked the front door, locked. I checked the windows, closed. The floral smell was so thick that my nose stung. For a moment I stood there trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Then I heard a slight rustle, almost like fabric being brushed or footsteps on a rug. My heart pounded even harder, and my scalp tingled with fear. I'm not the bravest guy in the world, but I've never considered myself paranoid either. Still, I felt cold sweat forming at the back of my neck. I whispered, "Hello?" and immediately felt silly for doing it. No response, just that cloying, sweet smell. I backed toward the hallway, keeping my eyes on the living room furniture. After a minute or two, the place went silent again. The smell started to lessen. It vanished quickly as if someone had flipped a switch on an air freshener. I heard the soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen. That was the only sound. I can't explain why, but I kept searching. I opened the closets, I looked behind the curtains, and I even peeked under the couch. Nothing. There was no trace of any device that could produce a voice or a smell. I was too wound up to sleep, so I sat in a dining chair, wide awake, scanning the living room every so often. Eventually, around midnight, I just crashed from exhaustion. I slept poorly, with random dreams of strangers standing in my house whispering things I couldn't understand. The next day, I felt rattled. I packed my bag, left earlier than usual, and spent the entire week debating whether I should cancel the lease. But it was a good deal, and I really needed a beach escape on weekends. I convinced myself that maybe it was some weird plumbing noise or draft that carried sounds from outside. Maybe I was overtired and confused normal nighttime sounds for whispers. I chose to keep the place and see if it was just my imagination. The following weekend, I returned on Friday night. I brought a can of odor neutralizer and sprayed the living room as soon as I arrived, hoping to break the cycle of that floral smell. At first, it worked. The place smelled like chemicals, which wasn't great, but it drowned out the flowery odor. I thought that maybe this would solve the problem. Around 9 p.m., I lay on the couch, watching an old movie on my laptop. The windows were locked, and the night air outside was cool. Everything seemed normal. Then, around 11 p.m., I felt a slight chill and sat up. The lamp flickered a bit, and that sweet smell entered my nostrils again. It came from nowhere, cutting right through the neutralizer spray. My throat clenched and my stomach felt queasy. I stood up and walked around the living room, trying to spot anything unusual, but the place was as plain as ever. No odd lights, no hidden gadgets. The smell grew stronger, and I started to sweat. It felt suffocating. That's when I heard a soft mumble behind me. I spun around fast, but all I saw was the wall and the empty space near the TV stand. The whispering grew slightly louder, like someone speaking to me from across the room. I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like a calm, rhythmic recitation. My heart raced and a wave of goosebumps spread over my arms. I clenched my fists, unsure if I should run out or try to record it on my phone. I managed to grab my phone and switch on the camera, but the audio didn't capture anything at first. The whispering stopped. The smell intensified for a few seconds, then dropped off completely. 1 second it was overpowering, and the next second it was gone. My phone picked up nothing except my own breathing and the hum of the fan. I felt a dull ache in my chest, not from pain but from the adrenaline. My legs felt shaky. At that point, I really wanted answers, so I decided to check outside, thinking maybe the neighbor had something to do with this. I went out to the shared driveway. The neighbor's side was dark. No lights on inside. The shutters were closed. I even pressed my ear to the front wall, but I heard nothing. No TV, no voices, no movement. Just the distant crash of waves and the wind rustling some shrubs near the porch. I stood there for a while, trying to slow my breathing. The salty night air helped a bit, but I couldn't relax. Over the next few weekends, variations of the same thing happened. I'd come back from the beach in the early evening, and the floral aroma would be there. Sometimes it lingered for a half hour. Sometimes it faded in minutes. Occasionally, I'd catch a murmur or whisper that sounded like quiet chanting, but I never found anyone in my house. I stopped sleeping well. I'd jerk awake at odd hours, thinking I heard a voice in the living room. I could never catch anything definitive. The neighbors' visits continued randomly, always short, always at strange hours. One Sunday morning, I caught the neighbor just as he was loading his suitcase into his car. I walked over and said, "Hey, morning," trying to act casual. He gave me a quick nod but looked uneasy. I asked, "Do you ever get a weird floral smell in your place?" He paused for a second, then said, "No," and climbed into his car without asking any follow-up questions. He just backed out of the driveway and left. That was it. No curiosity, no surprise, no small talk. I'm sitting here now in my living room writing this with my phone propped on my lap. It's late, and my heart is pounding because that smell came back about 15 minutes ago. It's lingering as I type. I keep expecting to hear whispering at any moment. My nerves are shot. I feel sweat on my forehead, and the hair on my arms is standing on end. I can't figure it out logically. Chemical products don't vanish so fast. They usually disperse gradually. This scent appears and disappears within seconds sometimes. The whispers always come when the smell is at its strongest, like some invisible presence is standing here, talking in a hushed voice. I haven't heard it tonight yet, but I'm on edge. I keep looking over my shoulder. The TV is off and I can see my reflection in the dark screen. My legs feel tense, like I'm ready to spring up if something moves. Every minute that passes without a sound somehow makes me more anxious. The silence is almost worse than a direct noise. My only comfort is knowing I can walk out the door and drive away if it gets too scary. But I don't want to lose my deposit, and I keep telling myself I might be overreacting. I have no proof of anything supernatural. I have no recordings of the whispers, and no photos of the floral smell, obviously. I only have my own experiences, and they make my skin crawl. It's not intense enough to make me run screaming, but it's unsettling. I don't know if it's something with the structure of the house or if my neighbor is using some weird incense on his side of the wall. But why would the odor disappear so quickly? And why would I hear murmurs in my living room when there's no one there? Every time I drive back here, I wonder if I'll open the door and smell that sickly sweet fragrance. Sometimes I wish I'd see my neighbor and confront him about it, but he's barely around. When he is, he never seems open to talking. So I sit here, telling myself I'm just tired and stressed. But deep down, I know I'm lying to myself. Something about this place is off. I rented it to escape, but now I feel tense the moment I arrive. I'm thinking about giving the key back and losing whatever I paid just to regain some peace of mind. Yet part of me stays. I guess I'm curious. Or maybe I'm stubborn. I still enjoy the beach, the sunshine, and the sense of space. But at night, when I walk up the little steps to the front door and slide the key into the lock, my stomach tightens. I listen carefully before I walk in, bracing for that pungent wave of floral scent. Sometimes I smell nothing. Other times it's there, strong as ever. I can't predict it. It's late now, and I'm tired. I can't stand this tension much longer. I'm keeping one eye on the living room as I get ready to turn off the light. My hands are shaking a bit. I don't hear anything at the moment, which somehow makes it feel worse. I'm worried that the minute I relax, I'll hear that quiet chanting or feel the scent swell up in my nostrils. I just want an uneventful night, but I've learned not to count on that here. I can't prove anything unusual is happening, but I can't explain what I've seen, heard, and smelled either. All I know is that every time I come back from the beach, the tension is right here waiting for me. It sits in the living room, invisible, filling the air with a cloying floral perfume and faint, inexplicable whispers. I don't know if it's me or this house, but I do know I'm always on edge, and that's not why I came here. I keep telling myself I'll figure it out, but I haven't yet. I'm left with the same question every weekend. Will I open the door and find silence, or will I step into that suffocating fragrance and hear a voice that shouldn't be there? For now, I'm stuck waiting, still uneasy, still looking over my shoulder, hoping for an answer that never comes. I walk into the gym on a Thursday night with my keys in my hand and my phone in my pocket. It's around 10:30 p.m. The lights are still on, but the place is quiet enough that I can hear my own footsteps on the rubber floor. I'm here alone. I locked the front door behind me about 10 minutes ago after the last client left. My plan is to wipe down the machines, empty the trash, and make sure the equipment is in order before I shut everything off. This place is small, just a few rows of weight machines, some free weights, a squat rack in the corner, a bench press setup, and a few treadmills. It's a normal scene. Nothing fancy, nothing spooky. But lately, I've been hearing things after hours, and tonight, I feel it even before I take 2 steps in. I turn off the wall-mounted speaker system that usually plays low-volume music. It's my habit now. I can't concentrate on cleaning with random pop songs in the background. Also, I want to see if that sound appears again. It's happened a few times in the past week. Once the music is off, I can hear a dull hum from the fluorescent lights overhead. The air feels thick. My face is a bit sweaty because I just finished demonstrating some exercises to a new client. I grip the disinfectant spray bottle in my hand and move to the first treadmill. The rubber belt is dusty from the day's use, so I spray the surface and wipe it clean with a rag. While I'm rubbing the edges of the treadmill, I notice a metallic clang. It's faint, but it's there, like a small piece of metal tapping against another piece of metal. I freeze. My arms stop moving. I hold my breath. My heart feels like it's beating faster than it was a moment ago. I glance around, but nothing is shifting. The free weights on the rack are still. The machines are motionless. I wait a few seconds, but I don't hear it again. I tell myself that maybe it's the building settling or some pipe in the wall. I try to push the thought aside. I return to wiping the treadmill, but I'm aware that I'm here alone with no one else around. I finish with the treadmill and move to the next one. I want to get all the cardio machines cleaned before I tackle the free weights. As I lean in, I feel a slight chill, maybe from the air conditioner turning on. The vents blow softly above my head. I wipe the console. I check the water bottle holder. Nothing there. Then I reach down to clean the platform by the motor. That's when I hear a louder clang. It sounds like a weight plate scraping against the bar. The sound makes the hairs on my arms stand up. I jerk my head toward the free weight section. Nothing is moving. The barbells rest on their stands. The plates are in their usual spots along the wall. There's no one near them. I swallow hard. My throat feels dry. I set the spray bottle on the floor for a second. I stare at the barbell on the bench press station. It's empty. No plates are attached. But the clang I heard was definitely a weight plate. I walk toward the bench press, not bothering to hide my footsteps. I call out, "Hey, anyone in here?" even though I know the door is locked. My voice echoes slightly in the open room. I hear nothing in response, just the low hum of the lights. I stand by the bench press and place my hand on the bar. It's cool to the touch, it's steady. The gym is bright enough that I can see every corner from this spot. Nothing is out of place. I feel my stomach tighten. I feel a knot in my chest. My breathing is short. I hold the bar for a moment longer, half expecting it to move. It stays still. I shake my head and let go. I remind myself to stay calm. Maybe my mind is playing tricks on me. I decide to finish cleaning, then go home. I head back to the treadmills, pick up the spray bottle, and resume wiping. Everything stays quiet for about 5 minutes. I calm down a bit. My heart rate settles. I finish the last treadmill and move to the free weight area. I always start with the dumbbells, making sure they're returned to the rack in order. People usually leave them scattered on the floor. Tonight, everything looks normal. I go one by one, picking them up, checking for chalk or sweat, giving them a quick wipe, then returning them to the rack. My palms feel a bit clammy, but I keep working. The rub of the rag against metal is repetitive. I focus on that. I try not to think about the sound I heard. Then, halfway through cleaning the dumbbells, I hear another clang. This time it's louder, like a weight plate hitting the ground, but not in a violent crash, more like a soft drop. I whip my head around toward the bench press area. Nothing. I look to the squat rack. The bar is still. The plates on the rack are lined up. I check the floor. No plates lying around. Everything is in its place. But I swear I heard a distinct drop. My pulse speeds up. I feel my hands trembling a bit, so I grip the rag tighter. I walk over to the squat rack. I check the plates on the side. I lift one of them and let it settle back onto the peg. The sound is similar to what I heard, but not exact. I scan the entire area again. The gym is still empty. My shoulders tense up. I lick my lips because my mouth feels dry. I remind myself that maybe I heard something from outside. The street behind the gym has a metal fence. Sometimes people pass by with shopping carts or scrap metal, but I realize the side door is closed and locked, and those outside sounds usually come from the alley, not from inside the weight room. I stand there for a moment just listening. My heartbeat sounds loud in my ears. The lights flicker a bit, something they do sometimes. The air feels stale. I swallow again. All right, I mutter under my breath, trying to keep my composure. I return to the dumbbells. I place the last few back on the rack. I do a quick glance around. Everything seems in order. I move on to the resistance machines. These are lined up against the far wall. There's a lat pull-down machine, a chest press, a leg extension, and a few others. I start with the lat pull-down. I clean the seat, the handle, the pin selector, and the frame. My stomach feels uneasy, and I keep glancing over my shoulder toward the free weight section. It's hard to focus when I'm expecting that sound again. The next few minutes go by without incident, though. I finish wiping down all the machines, and I feel my nerves settle a bit. I grab the trash bag from behind the front counter. The entire place is quiet except for the crinkle of the bag and my footsteps. I walk around and collect small bits of paper, empty supplement bottles, and used wipes from the trash bins near each station. Everything else stays still. I calm down enough that I'm almost convinced the noises were just normal building sounds. I tie off the trash bag, place it near the entrance, and head to the reception area. That's where I keep my phone, the cleaning supplies, and the key to the back storage closet. The moment I turn my back to the weight room, I hear the metallic clank again. It sounds so close that I jump. The trash bag slips from my hand and lands on the floor with a thud. My heart thumps hard. I spin around fast. My eyes scan the weight area. I see the bench press bar wobbling. It's a slight motion, like if someone just racked it or lifted it. I stare at it, not sure if I'm imagining it. I step closer, my legs feeling shaky. I reach out and grab the bar. It's still vibrating a bit. It slows to a stop under my hand. I glance around, checking the corners, the door, everywhere. I see nothing but the same rows of equipment. There's no sign of anyone. The entire room smells like rubber flooring and disinfectant. I step away from the bench. I feel my breathing pick up. My forehead feels damp. My shirt sticks to my back. My thoughts race. Did someone sneak in? Is there a hidden door? Am I losing it? I walk around the machines, checking each one. I peek behind the squat rack, behind the cable machine, behind the water dispenser. There's no one. The doors are locked. The windows are intact. I stand in the center of the weight room, turning in a slow circle, scanning each spot. Everything is normal except for the lingering adrenaline in my body. I wonder if I should call someone, maybe a friend or the gym owner, but I don't want to sound ridiculous. It's late and I'm in charge, so I decide to keep it together. I stand there for a few moments, breathing heavily. Then I realize I'm wasting time. I walk back to reception, pick up the trash bag, and check my phone. It's now almost 11 p.m. That's around the time these noises have been happening all week. I feel a chill on my arms. I try to distract myself by cleaning the front counter. I spray the surface, wipe it down, organize some papers, and stack the membership forms. The entire time, I keep looking toward the weight room. It stays silent. I decide to finish the night quickly. I step behind the desk to grab the floor mop. The moment I do, there's another clang. It sounds like a plate hitting the bar, or maybe someone shifting weights on the leg press. I slam my hand on the counter. My heart bangs in my chest. I rush to the weight room again. I see no movement, but the lat pull-down handle is swaying back and forth just a little. The cable is swinging. I walk up to it, stand right in front of it, and watch it slow down. I can't explain it. There's no breeze strong enough to move that cable. I press my palm against it to stop it from swinging. My hand is shaking. I blink a few times. My breathing is ragged. I feel a tightness in my chest, like I can't get enough air. I circle the machines one more time. I peek under benches. The lights buzz above me. The place is empty, but I can't ignore the thumping in my ears. I decide I should mop the floor fast and get out. So I go back, grab the mop and bucket, and walk to the far side of the gym. My footsteps echo in the silence. I dunk the mop, wring it out, and start mopping near the treadmills. My arms move mechanically back and forth, covering the rubber floor with a thin layer of soapy water. The smell of cleaning solution stings my nose. I try to focus on the task. The minutes crawl by. Every few seconds I stop and listen. I hear only the scrape of the mop head on the floor. I move on to another area, then another. It stays quiet for a while, but that tension in my body doesn't go away. After 10 minutes of mopping, I'm almost finished. I'm near the squat rack, carefully guiding the mop around the base. Suddenly, I sense a movement behind me. I don't hear a footstep or anything specific, but I feel a presence. My neck prickles. I spin around so fast I nearly drop the mop. The entire place looks the same, but my stomach churns. My eyes dart from the bench press to the cable station, expecting something to move. Nothing moves. I'm still alone. I place the mop against the rack, lean on it for a second, and rub my eyes. I'm tense all over. I look at the time on my phone again. It's 11:15 p.m. I decide that's enough. I abandon the mop bucket. I can clean the rest tomorrow. I head to the front area. My pulse is racing. I grab my jacket, the trash bag, and my keys. I flick off the lights in the weight room, leaving only the corridor and reception lights on. Darkness engulfs the machines. The shapes of the benches and racks become silhouettes. I don't want to stare at them too long. I make sure the main entrance is locked. I set the alarm. The silence feels heavy. My mouth is dry. I swallow and force myself to keep moving. As I reach for the final light switch near the front door, I hear one last clang. It's not distant. It's right behind me. I spin around, but all I see is darkness. My breath catches. My muscles feel like they're freezing in place. Then there's silence again. My heart pounds. I can't see anything moving. I stand there trying to steady my breathing. After a few seconds, I realize I can't handle another minute of this. I shut the last light, open the door, step out, and lock it behind me. Outside, the air feels cool on my sweaty face. My hands are shaking so much that I drop my keys. I pick them up off the sidewalk. I glance back through the glass door, but it's too dark to see anything. My skin prickles. I take a few deep breaths. The street is empty. A soft breeze moves through the empty parking spots. I stand there, my chest still tight, my mind buzzing with questions. But I don't have any answers, and I'm not going back in. I walk to my car and start the engine. My thoughts feel jumbled, but one thing is clear. Every time I'm alone in that place near closing time, something is messing with me. It's not a normal building noise. It's not the air conditioner. It feels like someone is there. Someone I can't see, picking up weights or shifting equipment. As I pull away from the curb, I look at the gym's dark windows. Part of me wonders if I'll see a shadow move. I don't see anything, but the feeling sticks with me the whole drive home. I grip the steering wheel tight, focusing on the road. My body is still on edge. Tonight wasn't the first time it happened, but it was the loudest. Tomorrow, I'll have to face it again. For now, I just want to get home and lock my door. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, even though I'm alone in the car. I tell myself it's just nerves, but I can't deny what I heard. I keep thinking about that bar vibrating under my hand, like someone had just used it. That memory follows me all the way down the street, and I don't calm down until I'm finally in my own apartment. Lights on, door locked, phone in hand. I never used to worry about odd noises in my house. I grew up telling myself wood creaks and floors settle, and there's no reason to panic about that. But after what's been happening in my attic, I'm not so confident anymore. I don't see any shape in the shadows. I don't see dust falling. I just feel a light vibration in the boards whenever I step up there, like something else is shifting around with me, step by step. I live alone in a 2-story place with an attic on top. The attic used to be packed with boxes. I never needed anything up there, so I stayed away. This house is in a colder region, and the attic's insulation helps keep everything warm. That's why it exists in the first place. I've known that since I moved in a few years ago. The space was always cramped and dusty, so I didn't bother exploring. One day, though, I realized I needed more room for storage. I had boxes from old jobs, books, old clothes, random electronics. I decided to organize them. I figured I would clear out junk I didn't need, maybe donate a few items and stack things more neatly. That day, I climbed the narrow wooden steps that fold down from the ceiling. I remember the dust and stale air hitting my nose. The space was cramped with low rafters and old beams. There were cobwebs in the corners, and the single overhead bulb gave off a weak orange light. I started sorting boxes. I saw old magazines, receipts, useless cables, and broken furniture parts that I'd tossed up there years ago. After moving a few boxes, I found something I hadn't noticed before. It looked like older supports or maybe leftover construction frames near the back wall. They were thick, dark wooden structures. They formed partial dividers or strange frames that didn't look like they belonged to anything practical. They were behind a tall stack of boxes, so I never saw them before. I put on some gloves and tried to push on one of the wooden pieces to see if it was secure. It felt firm, but it creaked a bit. The wood looked old, older than the rest of the attic. I didn't see any nails or screws. It looked fitted in place with old-style joints. I didn't think much of it. I moved on, sorted more boxes, and made a decent amount of progress that day. After an hour or two, I got tired of the dust and hauled some trash bags downstairs. I left the weird wooden structures alone, just acknowledging they were there. That night I went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night. I heard something faint, like a soft squeak of wood. It reminded me of the floorboards settling, but it had a pattern. A short pause, then another squeak. It sounded like footsteps. I lay there half awake, telling myself it was normal. This is an older house, and wood can make noise. Still, I felt a bit uneasy. The noise stopped after a minute, and I managed to fall back asleep. The next day, I returned to the attic to finish cleaning. I wanted to label the boxes I'd decided to keep. I brought a marker, some tape, and a notebook for taking notes. I started walking around and felt a strange sensation in my feet. It was like a faint trembling in the wooden boards. It almost felt like someone else was pacing near me, but not on the same exact spot. At first, I figured maybe I was just being paranoid from the night noises. But as I kept moving boxes, that small vibration didn't stop. It wasn't huge, but enough to notice. I knelt down and touched the floor. I couldn't see any cracks or shifting sections, but when I stood up again, I heard a gentle creak behind me. It was quiet, almost like a whisper, but it matched my steps. I turned around quickly. There was nothing but stacked boxes and the wooden supports. I stepped toward the back area. I heard a small sound from the other side, like another board squeaking in response. I moved left, and the squeak moved right. I held my breath and listened. My heart pounded. I could hear my pulse in my ears. The attic was too cramped to run around and chase the sound, so I just stood still. As soon as I stopped moving, the sound stopped. That made my skin crawl. It's one thing if the wood is settling. It's something else if it stops when I stop and starts when I start. I took a slow breath and forced myself to keep labeling. As I worked, I tried to be logical. I thought maybe these old boards had some weird echo effect, or maybe there was a raccoon or squirrel up there. I didn't see any droppings though, and I didn't see any holes or signs of animals chewing on the wood. It was quiet otherwise. The only time I noticed anything strange was when I moved. After about 40 minutes, I had enough. I climbed down the attic steps, sealed the hatch, and just sat in my living room to calm down. I tried to move on with my day. I ran errands, cooked dinner, watched some TV, and forgot about it for a while. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought I heard light thumps above me. They matched a slow, deliberate pattern. I stayed in bed, under the covers, and tried to slow my breathing. The sounds faded after a few minutes, but my nerves were shot. The next morning, I decided I would go up there one more time. I wanted to see if there was any physical evidence of pests or loose floorboards. I also thought I might check for any weird cracks in the structure. When I pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up, the smell of old wood and dust hit me again. The light in the attic looked dimmer than usual. Maybe the bulb was going bad. It flickered a bit when I tugged on the chain. I scanned the floor. Everything was exactly where I left it. The same piles of boxes, the same old support structures in the back. I walked around checking corners, shining a flashlight into nooks and crannies. I didn't see holes, droppings, or anything that might explain an animal. I stomped on a few sections of the floor to see if they shifted. The boards felt sturdy, but they creaked in that same muted tone. I moved toward the back wall again, where those wooden dividers stood. I tried to pull on one of them to see if there was something behind it. It refused to budge. I tapped on the wood. It sounded solid. As I started to walk away, I felt that vibration under my feet again. It was like a gentle hum, almost. I turned around quickly, shining the flashlight between boxes. I couldn't see any movement, but every time I stepped, I heard a faint squeak from a different corner of the attic. It felt like something was circling me. My stomach tightened. My muscles felt tense. The hair on my arms stood up. I tried to keep calm, but my breathing got shallow. I decided to test something. I stood completely still for a few seconds, controlling my breathing. No sound. Then I took one long step forward. The attic answered with a slow creak behind me. I jerked around, shining the flashlight at the floor. Nothing. I took a step to the side, and I heard another squeak behind one of the wooden beams. I walked in a small circle, and the noise circled around me. I felt my palms sweat. It was like some invisible presence was pacing in sync with me, always keeping just out of sight. At that point, I realized I had to get out. But I also felt a strange urge to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I placed my palm on the floor again, pressing down slightly. I felt the faint vibration respond. It pulsed once, then stopped. My heart hammered in my chest. I stood up and forced myself to the attic ladder. My mouth felt dry, my legs felt a bit shaky. I climbed down, pulled the ladder up, and sealed the attic door as fast as I could. I stood in the hallway listening. I heard no more creaking. Over the next few days, I avoided going up there. I felt uneasy just walking under the attic hatch. I caught myself glancing at it every time I passed by, waiting to hear something. At night, though, I sometimes heard those subtle footstep-like noises above me. Not always, but often enough that I struggled to sleep. I considered calling an inspector or an exterminator, but I couldn't imagine how to explain that the wood was responding to my movements without any visible cause. I didn't want to sound like a paranoid man hearing ghosts. Eventually, curiosity got the best of me again. I decided to return with a friend. I texted a buddy of mine and asked if he could help me check the attic for any structural problems. I didn't share all the details about the odd noises. I said I just wanted a second opinion on the old beams. He agreed to come by one afternoon, but when the day came, he canceled at the last minute because he had to work. I didn't push the issue. I figured I'd do a quick look myself. I wanted closure. I put on a headlamp, brought a small crowbar in case any boards were loose, and climbed up again. The attic felt oppressive. The air felt heavier, like it was thicker with dust. My throat itched when I breathed in. I moved slowly, shining my light on the floor. I took a few steps. The old boards creaked under my weight, but I also heard that secondary squeaking from somewhere else. Each time I moved my foot, another section of the attic seemed to respond with its own squeak. My stomach flipped. I aimed my light on the wooden supports in the back. I saw a faint gap between two beams. It looked like a small space, maybe big enough to reach through. I moved some boxes aside and crouched. My knees popped as I lowered myself. My headlamp illuminated dust floating in front of me. I pressed on one of the boards. It gave a little, but not enough to open. I tried to wedge my crowbar in. The board shifted, and I heard a loud creak behind me. It sounded closer than ever, like someone standing right above me on another section of floor. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. I spoke out loud, just a single word. "Hello?" My voice trembled. The attic was silent. I swallowed and pulled on the board again. This time it moved a few inches. I shined my light through the gap. I only saw darkness, maybe a small enclosed space. I didn't see anything living. I didn't see any objects. I started to feel silly. Then I heard several quick squeaks around me, almost like a short flurry of steps. My pulse pounded in my ears. I yanked the crowbar out, stumbled backward, and nearly fell over a box. My light swung around. Nothing was there. Nothing at all. Just dust, boxes, and those old supports. But I felt the boards under my feet tremble as though something was passing right behind me. I spun around, shining my light, but saw nothing. My muscles clenched up, and sweat dripped down my forehead. I couldn't stand it anymore. I hustled to the attic ladder. My steps were loud and frantic. Each time my foot hit the floor, I heard that same squeak behind me. The feeling of being followed wouldn't stop. I gripped the edge of the hatch and climbed down, my hands shaking so badly that I almost missed a step on the ladder. I flipped the ladder up, slammed the hatch shut, and locked it. I stood there in the hallway, breathing hard. I felt my heart racing. I listened. No sound. I felt a slight tremor in my legs from the fear and adrenaline. I wiped the sweat off my face with my sleeve. I forced myself to walk away. I wanted to be anywhere but under that attic. For a few weeks, I refused to go back. I knew I couldn't stay out of there forever. I own the place and I need to maintain it. But each time I heard even a slight creak at night, my mind jumped to the attic. Sometimes I'd stand underneath the hatch and listen. I'd hold my breath, waiting for a sign of movement. Usually it was quiet. Other times I'd hear one soft creak. Then it would go silent again. I tried to come up with every rational explanation. Old boards, wind, temperature changes, maybe some elusive rodent. But it doesn't line up with the way that noise follows me around when I'm up there. It doesn't explain the matching vibrations under the floor. It doesn't explain how the squeaking steps stop the instant I stop. I still live here. I still sleep here. When I walk by the attic ladder, I sometimes feel a little shift in the ceiling, but I ignore it. I keep the hatch locked. I try not to think about those old wooden dividers or whatever might be behind them. I wonder if I disturbed something when I moved the boxes or tried to pry that board open. Maybe I triggered the noise by messing with a part of the house that's been untouched for decades. I can't say I have a final answer. I know I hear things that don't make sense. I feel them in the floor. It isn't loud. It doesn't knock anything over. It doesn't follow me downstairs. But every time I climb into that attic, it's there, waiting, stepping around me, tracking my movements. I don't see anything. I only hear and feel the slow, steady creaks, like footsteps in the boards. I have no proof. I have no visible evidence. But the sound is real. For now, I just keep that door shut and pretend everything's normal. It's easier that way. I haven't thrown out those old structures or touched that hidden space behind them. I figure if I leave them alone, maybe it'll stay quiet. If it wants that attic, it can have it. I don't plan on sleeping up there anytime soon. I'm not sure if I believe in ghosts, but something's in my attic, and it moves when I move. That's all I know. And it's enough to keep me downstairs, door locked, waiting and listening to the faint creaks overhead. If that's the price of living in an old house, then so be it. At least it stays in the attic and I can keep my distance. That's all I can do for now. I moved into this apartment because it was cheap, in a central spot, and the building seemed quiet. It's right above a bakery. During the day, I smell fresh bread, and it reminds me of lazy weekends. In the mornings, the aroma seeps through my open kitchen window. Everything felt perfect for the first few days. The bakery closes at 10 p.m. sharp, and then the entire street goes silent. No cars, no loud neighbors, no late-night deliveries. I figured I had discovered a hidden gem. On my first night here, I heard a faint clinking. I was in bed, and my bedroom is near the small hallway that leads to my living room. The sound floated through that hallway. It was so distant that I almost ignored it. It sounded like metal tapping on porcelain, the way a fork hits a plate. But it was soft enough that I could have chalked it up to normal apartment noises, so I didn't think too much about it. The next day, I unpacked boxes, arranged my couch, and set up my TV. Life felt normal. The bakery downstairs operated all morning, sending bursts of warm smells up into my place. I went down and bought a loaf of bread and some coffee. The owner seemed nice and said he was glad to have a new tenant upstairs. That night, after 10 p.m., the bakery shut down. I watched the owner switch off the lights and lock the door. Around midnight, the building was quiet. Then at about 2 a.m., I heard it again. This time I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water. The sound was more noticeable. It came from somewhere below or maybe around me. It was the noise of utensils and dishes. I tried to see if it was coming through the wall I share with my neighbors, but those neighbors usually go to sleep by 11. We have thick walls, so I rarely hear them. The sound was so specific. It was slow, like someone was eating. I heard a fork, then a pause, then maybe a knife scraping on a plate. It continued for a few minutes. I stood there near my kitchen counter and listened. My arms felt a little tense. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. It just felt off. Nobody should be in the bakery kitchen at that hour. Nobody should be cooking or cleaning down there because I've seen the employees leave before 11. I had trouble sleeping. My mind replayed the clinking. I don't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't figure out a rational source. In the morning, I went downstairs to grab coffee. I casually asked the owner if anyone stayed late last night. He frowned and said no. The bakery staff always leaves on time, and the kitchen is locked. I decided to brush it off. Sometimes pipes make weird noises or old buildings echo footsteps from other floors. I tried not to overthink it. For about a week, the same pattern repeated. The bakery closed at 10. Everything stayed silent until around 2 or 3 a.m. Then I heard that muted clatter of silverware and plates. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. I once stood by my apartment door and pressed my ear to it. The hallway was silent. I moved to my living room window, which faces the bakery roof. Nothing there. I walked around in my socks, trying to find the best spot to pinpoint the noise. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I checked each corner of my apartment, but I couldn't isolate the source. My heart pounded faster each time I heard it, and I felt a weird chill in my stomach, like the kind you get when you realize something is very wrong. One night, I decided to go downstairs and see if the bakery had any lights on. It was around 2:30 a.m. I took my keys, put on some shoes, and headed out into the hallway. The building lights were dim. My breathing felt loud against the silence. I walked down the stairs slowly. My legs felt a little shaky. At the bottom, I looked through the small window on the bakery door. It was dark inside. No machines running, no ovens on, no sign of movement. The smell of bread was long gone. I let out a breath and tried the door. It was locked. I stood there for about a minute just listening. I heard nothing. But as soon as I turned around to head back up, I heard the faintest clank of a fork on a plate, like it came from deep inside the bakery. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me freeze. I felt my chest tighten. My fingers shook when I gripped the stair railing. I turned back, pressed my ear to the glass. Silence. My pulse thumped in my ears. I went back upstairs because there was nothing else I could do. The next morning, I told the bakery owner that I heard some noises at night. He asked if I might be dreaming or if maybe my neighbors were up late. I said no. I know what I heard. He shook his head and promised nobody was in there after hours. He even assured me that the bakery's security system was armed at night. That's when I stopped asking. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Every night, it continued. The sound lasted maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I would lie in bed, wide awake, my arms tensed under the covers. I tried using earplugs, but they weren't enough to block it. The clink-clink would cut through everything. One night, I turned on my TV to mask the noise. I could still hear that tapping under the dialogue of the show I was watching. My jaw clenched so tight it started to hurt. I woke up with a headache. I had to figure this out. One evening, before they closed, I asked one of the bakery staff if they ever heard weird noises. He looked at me like he didn't understand. He said that once he's out, he doesn't come back until early morning. He told me to maybe check with the landlord. I hesitated, but I decided it might be worth mentioning to the landlord. The landlord's office was a small unit on the first floor, but he was often away, so I left him a note about hearing strange sounds. He never got back to me. That night, I tried a more systematic approach. I stayed up with all the lights off except for a lamp in the living room. I turned off the TV and sat on the couch with a notepad. I planned to write down the exact time the sound started and any details I could pick up. Around 1:55 a.m., I heard it, the gentle clatter of dishes. It was the same pattern: scrape, pause, scrape, then 2 or 3 taps in a row. It echoed just below me, like it was right under my floor. My heart rate spiked. My palms got sweaty. My arms felt cold. I didn't move. I listened for about 5 minutes. It sounded like someone was eating a late dinner in slow motion. Sometimes I caught what might have been a faint swallow or a quiet exhale. I couldn't be sure. The hair on my forearms stood up. I scribbled down the time, 1:55 to 2:03. The noise stopped. Then everything was silent. I got up, quietly opened my door, and stepped into the hallway. No lights were on, and it smelled like dust. The building's old walls absorbed my footsteps. I moved toward the stairwell, and the boards under my feet creaked. My throat felt dry. I reached the top of the staircase and leaned over the railing. It was dark downstairs. I waited, but I heard nothing. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might jump out of my chest. When I turned to go back, the clattering started again. It came from the direction of my apartment now, as if it had moved. I froze. It lasted only a few seconds, then stopped. I felt a chill on the back of my neck. I hurried back into my apartment and locked the door. My knees felt weak. I sat on my couch and stared at the floor. The next day, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe the pipes in this building just make a peculiar sound. But I've heard pipes before, and this was different. This had the clear tone of cutlery hitting plates. I thought about bringing a friend over, but I'm new in town and don't know many people yet. I also felt embarrassed about telling someone to camp out with me just to hear some weird dinner noises in the middle of the night. I started noticing I wasn't sleeping well. I woke up groggy. I didn't feel hungry in the mornings. My nerves were shot. Each night I waited for that sound with a tense, anxious feeling in my gut. I tried playing white noise, but I still heard the subtle clink. One night around 3 a.m., I got so fed up that I put on sweatpants, grabbed a flashlight, and snuck down to the bakery entrance again. I thought maybe I'd see someone inside. The door was still locked. I shone my flashlight through the glass. The racks were empty. Tables were clean. Not a single pan was out of place. No movement, no sound. Yet in my ears, I thought I heard the faint echo of a fork tapping on porcelain. My chest tightened, and I hurried back up the stairs. I could hear my own heartbeat. My breathing got faster, and my forehead felt hot. I tried to ask the neighbor across the hall about nighttime noises. He said he's out cold by 10 p.m. He said our walls were thick and that he never hears anything. I asked the neighbor upstairs, an older lady, if she ate late at night. She seemed offended and said she never leaves her bed after 8 p.m. That left the bakery, but the staff swore they weren't inside. A few weeks went by and the routine never changed. Sometimes the sound started at 2 a.m., sometimes at 3 a.m. It always lasted a few minutes. It was always that same slow, deliberate pattern. I tried ignoring it. I tried wearing headphones. I still felt on edge. My body would tense at night, expecting the noise. My hands shook a little when I washed dishes. I felt a knot in my stomach whenever I looked at the clock and saw midnight approach. The sense of being watched or hearing something I shouldn't hear got under my skin. One night, I invited a coworker over after we finished our shift. We ate pizza in my living room. I told him about the noises. He seemed skeptical. Around 1:45 a.m., he was about to leave, but I asked him to hang around for a bit. I wanted him to hear this. We sat quietly. At exactly 2 a.m., the clinking started. He froze. I saw his eyes widen. He whispered, "That's definitely metal on ceramic." He got up, tiptoed to my window, and tried to see if it was coming from outside. Nothing out there. We looked at each other. We didn't say much. We just listened. After a few minutes, it stopped. He exhaled and said, "Dude, that's weird." He left soon after, looking uneasy. At least I knew I wasn't imagining it. I never found the source. I tried everything. I asked the landlord to check for any issues with the bakery's ventilation or old appliances. He shrugged and said everything looked normal. I even called a plumber once, but he found no strange piping. The landlord refused to pay for any more checks. The bakery staff insisted they had no reason to be inside after hours. Sometimes when I hear that noise, I feel my throat tighten and my scalp tingle. I imagine someone sitting at a table below, calmly eating a meal in the middle of the night with no lights on. It makes my skin crawl. I stopped going downstairs late at night. It freaked me out too much. I tried going to bed earlier, but I'd just wake up at 2 a.m. to those soft taps and clatters. I tried going to bed later, hoping I'd be so tired I wouldn't notice, but the noise always woke me up anyway. Every morning the sun comes up and the smell of bread drifts into my kitchen. The bakery opens at 6 a.m., and people gather outside for fresh pastries. By then, I'm either awake or half asleep. The nighttime tension fades in daylight, but it never goes away completely. I feel it lingering in my chest. I wonder if something else is going on in this building. I keep telling myself I'll move out eventually, but for now, I'm stuck here with this late-night ritual that I can't explain. That's where things stand. The noises happen regularly. They sound like cutlery and plates. I haven't seen anyone using the bakery at that hour, and my neighbors don't admit to anything. I sometimes think I'll catch whoever or whatever is causing it, but I have no leads. The landlord won't help. The owner says the bakery is locked and the security system is on. Yet night after night I hear that unmistakable clinking. I don't know if it's a strange acoustic quirk of the building or something else. I just know I'm tired of it. I'm tired of lying in bed, waiting for that metallic tap to echo through my floor. But no matter what I do, it always comes back. Sometimes it feels like the building itself is having a secret meal down there in the darkness. I hate that thought, but I can't shake it. All I can do now is live with it. I dread the nights, but I get by. I go to work, I come home, and I listen. The sound will probably never go away, and I have no idea how to stop it. That's the story. There's no big reveal, no final solution. It's just me, my apartment, and that late-night dinner noise that no one can explain. I remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. I had just finished setting up the projector in my makeshift backyard theater. I was standing in front of the screen, feeling excited about the first real test. It was after sunset, and the neighborhood was quiet. The projector's power button felt smooth under my thumb, and when I pressed it, I expected a clean digital hum. Instead, I heard a quick burst of static, like old film spinning on a reel. It only lasted a second, but it made my pulse jump. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just the startup noise. I had never heard a digital projector do that, but I didn't question it much at the time. I should explain why I even have a projector in the first place. About 2 months ago, I decided to turn the small shed in my backyard into a personal movie theater. Some people call it an outbuilding, but around here we call it a shed or edicula. I'm a big film fan, and I wanted an old-school aesthetic. I found a retro-style digital projector that looked like an antique. The reviews were good, and the price was reasonable. I liked the idea of having a vintage look with modern functionality. When it arrived, I felt like I had scored something special. That first night, I ran some cables from my laptop to the projector. I set up a temporary table for the snacks, dimmed the lights, and tried out a short film clip. The projector turned on and the screen lit up. Everything looked normal for a few seconds. Then the image flickered. Not a digital glitch, but a flicker that reminded me of actual 35mm film. It made me think of those old newsreels you see in documentaries. But this was a digital file. I was watching a high-resolution video from my laptop. It shouldn't have looked like that. I paused the video and checked the connections. HDMI cable, power cord, everything seemed secure. I played the clip again. This time it ran smoothly for about a minute, then the flicker returned. Right when the flicker started, I heard a faint crackling sound, like static from an old radio. I stopped the video. The sound stopped. I restarted, and after another minute it came back. I got up and walked closer to the screen to see if the flicker was a problem with the lens. I noticed that every time the flicker began, The projector's fan noise changed pitch. It went from a low hum to a slightly higher whir. There was also a draft in the room. I remember turning around expecting to see the window open, but it was shut tight. The air felt cold against my arms. It wasn't freezing, but it gave me goosebumps. I was annoyed and confused. I kept checking the window lock to be sure it was sealed. It always was. For the next few days, I tried to ignore it. I watched a few short clips and practiced setting up chairs and the screen in different positions. The flicker and static happened irregularly, never long enough to completely ruin the experience, but enough to make me question the projector's quality. I thought maybe it was just a glitch in the firmware. Then one night, about a week into using it, I had a more unnerving experience. I was watching a classic black and white film. Everything was fine for about 20 minutes. Suddenly the screen blinked off. The audio from my speakers went silent. In the quiet, I heard a noise like film reels spinning. It sounded like someone was operating an old projector behind me. I turned around fast. Nothing was there, but the air felt frigid, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a few seconds. I couldn't see my breath or anything, but the chill felt unnatural. I stood there, holding my breath. Then, as quickly as it went off, the digital projector blinked back on. The movie resumed where it had left off, but the screen showed a faint stutter in the image. I froze in place, waiting for something else to happen. After about 15 seconds, the stutter went away and the movie played normally. I sat back down, but I kept feeling a strange tension in my chest, like my body was bracing for something else. From that point forward, every session in that shed felt uncomfortable. I'd get that static noise out of nowhere, and sometimes it came with a hushed whisper. It was low and deep, like a voice at the very edge of my hearing. If I tried to focus on it, it stopped. Whenever I'd pause the video or step away from the projector, my arms would get covered in goosebumps and I'd feel a sudden cold breeze that I couldn't trace to any open window or fan. I started checking the walls for holes or cracks. I inspected the floor for any sign of a draft. Nothing explained the sudden changes in temperature. The AC unit for my house wasn't connected to the shed. There were no vents that could cause such a quick drop in temperature. At one point, I even replaced the window seals, thinking maybe there was some gap I couldn't see. It made no difference. Every time I tested a movie at night, the flicker and that strange cold air returned. One evening, I decided to document everything meticulously. I planned to run a series of tests, watch how the projector behaved, and note any strange events. I turned on a simple test pattern, a white screen. I sat down with a notepad, and I wrote down every small detail. The projector ran perfectly for about 10 minutes. Then the screen flickered, and I heard the faint crackle again. I wrote it down. A few seconds later, the chill hit me. The notepad pages fluttered a bit like a small gust had passed through. I stood up, circled the shed, and checked the doors and windows. Sealed shut. The flicker continued. The static rose for a moment, then died. I went back to my seat and tried to stay calm. As I sat there, a low voice seemed to press against my left ear. It was a deep mumble, like someone was speaking right next to me but only forming half the words. My scalp tingled, and I felt my heart beating hard in my chest. The voice was gone in less than 2 seconds. I looked around. I was alone. The air felt dense, though, like something else occupied the space with me. I remember feeling angry at how ridiculous it all sounded in my own head. I'm a pretty rational person, but there I was, jumping at a half-heard whisper. I turned off the projector. I got up and walked out, trying not to let my imagination run wild. The next morning, I tried to watch the same test pattern in daylight. No problems at all. No flicker, no static, no chill. It looked and sounded completely normal. I even turned off the overhead lights in the shed to replicate the nighttime conditions. Still, nothing happened. It was perfect. I started to wonder if it was some weird effect of temperature drops at night, or maybe interference from nearby electronic devices. I live in a quiet area, though, and there aren't many signals around. The only difference I could think of was that nighttime is more silent, so maybe I was picking up random noises. But that wouldn't explain the cold air. The next night, I brought a small space heater into the shed to maintain a constant temperature. I turned on the projector, started a movie, and kept the heater running. For the first 15 minutes, everything was fine. The room stayed warm, the fan on the heater hummed, and the projector image stayed steady. Then out of nowhere, the static popped in. The flicker returned, and the heater's fan slowed down, almost like it was losing power. I listened carefully, and through the static, I heard that deep voice again. It was a single low phrase I couldn't make out. It sounded like a name, maybe. I shut the whole setup off. I didn't want to be there. My hands were shaking when I unplugged the cables. That night, I left the shed quickly, locking the door behind me. Over the next few weeks, I avoided using the projector alone. I invited a friend over one Saturday afternoon to watch a short film. Everything worked fine during the day. No flickers, no static, no voice. My friend teased me when I told him about the flicker and the cold air at night. He joked that I must be overworked. I laughed it off in front of him, but later that evening I tried again by myself. Sure enough, the flicker and static showed up within minutes of starting the movie. The chill crawled across my back, and I felt my muscles tense. I forced myself to keep watching, determined to see if something new would happen. The sound kept cutting in and out, replaced by that old reel noise, like an antique film projector spinning in the background. The cold draft kept coming and going. I tried to act casual about it, but I couldn't focus on the movie. Every flicker felt like a sudden jolt to my nerves. Every burst of static made my shoulders tighten. When I heard that low whisper again, I nearly jumped out of the chair. I tried to confront it. I said, "Hello? Who's there?" My voice sounded shaky. There was no reply, just the tail end of a raspy breath. It came from right behind me. I spun around and saw nothing. My heart was pounding so loud I thought I could hear it echo. I left in a hurry. I turned off the projector on my way out and kept my eyes on the door. I didn't even bother coiling up the cables. I needed to get out of there and calm down. Back inside my house, I felt relief. The normal temperature, the quiet of my living room, it all felt safe. I sat down and tried to rationalize everything. Could it be some defect in the projector? Could there be a wiring issue in the shed? But that wouldn't explain the cold air or the voice. I'd never had a problem with any electronics out there before. I used to store power tools in the shed, and I'd never noticed flickering lights or weird drafts. Something had changed after I set up the projector. I thought about returning the projector or selling it. The problem was that it only happened at night and it was inconsistent. I doubted I could prove it was defective. Besides, I actually liked the idea of having a retro-style projector in my personal theater. I kept telling myself I could figure out the issue or fix it, but every night I felt a sense of dread stepping into the shed. The moment I walked through the door, I'd brace for that wave of cold air. My stomach would tense. My palms would get sweaty. That's not how I wanted to feel about my movie space. Eventually, I started avoiding nighttime screenings altogether. I'd watch everything in the daytime or late afternoon. The problem never appeared during those hours. Still, the shed felt off. Even during the day, I'd sometimes catch a slight flicker at the corner of my eye, like the projector was threatening to act up. A few times, I took everything apart, cleaned the lens, updated the firmware, rearranged the furniture. Nothing helped. The weird events always came back if I tried using it at night. I've now gone a few weeks without a solo nighttime screening. I tried hosting a small group once. We watched a movie around 6 in the evening and it ended around 8. No issues. As soon as everyone left, I decided to test the projector alone. Within 5 minutes, the image flickered, and I felt that cold gust. It lasted for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. It was almost like it was reacting to my presence or to the fact I was alone. I can't ignore it anymore. It's not a glitch in the hardware. Something happens in that shed at night, and it's tied to this projector. When I think about it, my hands get clammy. My breath speeds up. The memory of that deep whisper feels too real. I don't have any grand explanation for it, but it's there. It's real enough to make me uneasy. Some nights I stand by my back door, looking at the shed through the kitchen window. wondering if I should go inside and test it one more time. Then I remember how my gut twisted the last time I tried. I remember the static. I remember the strange voice that felt inches away from my ear. My skin crawls. Right now, the projector is unplugged. The cables are wrapped up in a box, and I'm leaving them that way for a while. I've told myself I won't turn it on again by myself. If I watch anything out there, it'll be with someone else, and only before dark. I've started looking for another digital projector, one without that retro style. Maybe if I replace it, these problems will stop. But a part of me wonders if the shed is different now, if something has latched onto that space. I can't say for sure, and I don't have any proof. All I know is that every time I think about turning the projector on at night, I feel a weight in my chest. I like movies, but I'm not enjoying them the same way I used to. My private cinema idea backfired. Instead of feeling cozy, I feel a jolt of anxiety whenever I consider going in there after sunset. That's where I'm at. The projector sits idle, gathering dust, and I don't know when I'll work up the nerve to test it again. But for now, I'll stick to daytime viewings and leave the nighttime screenings to a normal TV inside my house. The shed can stay dark at night. I'm not taking any more chances with that strange flicker and those voices that don't belong in a modern digital setup. I heard the rain hitting my rooftop. It was loud and steady. My heart was racing and my hands were shaking. I had been waiting for that sound for days. I wanted to see the footprints again. They showed up every time it rained, and I still didn't have a reasonable explanation. I remember the first night it happened. I went up to the attic because I heard an odd dripping noise. I thought there was a leak. Instead, I found wet footprints in the dust. They looked like footprints from a pair of bare feet. They started in the middle of the attic floor and went all the way to the window. They stopped at the window frame, and there was no sign of them after that. I tried to clean them up with an old towel. The footprints were smaller than mine, but still belonged to an adult. The spacing between each step was uneven. It suggested a careful walk, like whoever made them was trying not to make noise. I looked around for puddles or any sign of water seeping through the roof. I found nothing that made sense. The only place where the water had collected was right under those footprints. The rest of the attic was dry. The next day, I went back up when the sun was out. There were no footprints. The dust had settled again and I saw no sign of water damage. I checked the window's frame. It was solid. No gaps, no rotting wood. Everything looked fine. I decided it must have been my imagination. Maybe I had stepped in something without noticing. Maybe I caused those prints myself, though my feet had been inside shoes all night. A week passed with no rain. Then another storm rolled in. The rain started around midnight, so I grabbed a flashlight and hurried up the stairs to the attic. I was nervous. My breath was shallow. My arms felt tense. I opened the door and aimed the flashlight around. The footprints were back. Same shape, same size, and same path. They appeared to start in the center of the attic floor and stopped at the window again. I checked the beam in the ceiling. It wasn't leaking. I moved the flashlight over the corners. No water was dripping. The footprints were the only wet spots. I pressed my hand against the floor near them. The wood was dry except for those exact spots. I followed them carefully. My heart was pounding. I felt a headache forming. My head felt tight. Each footprint looked distinct. I could see every toe. I ran my fingers over one print and felt that it was damp. The water coated my fingertips. I wiped my hand on my jeans and moved closer to the window. The footprints ended at the window frame again. I leaned over to look outside. It was dark and rainy. The wind blew some drops in my face. I felt a chill and wiped the rain off my cheek. I heard a thump above me, like something shifting on the roof. I stuck my head out the window to see if there was a loose shingle. That's when I saw the shape on top of the roof, crouched near the far edge. It was a figure with hunched shoulders and a bent spine. Its head was tilted forward, facing the distant streets and lights below. I froze. I gripped the windowsill with one hand and held the flashlight with the other. I aimed the beam at the figure. I saw a quick movement, and it slipped away from the light. I couldn't make out a face. I couldn't see any details. My legs felt weak and my throat was dry. I pulled my head back inside and stayed by the window for a few seconds. I wanted to open the window further and climb onto the roof, but I was afraid of slipping. The rain was heavy. I closed the window and locked it even though it was already locked. I stood there trying to figure out what had happened. That shape on the roof didn't make sense. I didn't see how anyone could climb up there from the outside without a ladder or special equipment. The gutters were old and wouldn't support a person's weight. I went back to the footprints and tried to see if they led anywhere else. I found nothing. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept picturing that hunched shape in the darkness. The next morning, I checked the roof from the outside. I walked around the perimeter of the house, looking for footprints on the shingles. I didn't see anything unusual. There were no broken branches on the ground. Nothing seemed out of place. I went up to the attic again in daylight. No footprints, no puddles. It was as if nothing had happened. I swept the floor to remove any dust that had footprints. I wanted a clean slate for the next time it rained. Days went by. I thought about what to do if I saw that figure again. I considered installing cameras, but I didn't have the money for that at the time. I looked at cheap motion sensors, but I didn't know if that would help. I got restless every time the clouds gathered. I felt a rush of anxiety and curiosity whenever I heard thunder. I wanted to catch whoever was making those footprints. I wanted to see them up close. Eventually, another storm arrived late one evening. I was in the living room when the thunder shook the windows. I took a deep breath, grabbed my flashlight, and climbed the stairs. I felt my shoulders tighten. I opened the attic door and immediately smelled something damp. I flicked the light switch and the old bulb cast a dim glow. There they were. The footprints started in the same spot and led to the window. I walked along them, step by step. I crouched down and felt one of the prints. It was cold. My stomach felt uneasy. I heard a scraping sound on the roof. It made me jump. My fingers tightened around the flashlight. I looked up at the rafters. The noise seemed to come from above. I decided to act. I unlatched the window. I lifted it open and propped it with a piece of wood. The wind blew rain inside, hitting the floor behind me. I leaned out. The shingles were soaked. I grabbed the frame and tried to steady myself. I stuck my upper body through the window. My shirt got drenched. I felt the rain on my face and it stung my eyes. I turned my head to the left and saw nothing but the wet roof and darkness. I turned to the right and spotted a faint shape at the peak of the roof. It was that same bent figure. It seemed to be looking at something far away. I couldn't see its face. I couldn't hear breathing or any sound that belonged to a person. I wasn't sure if it was a person at all. I called out. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. I shouted, "Who's there?" My voice echoed, and the figure moved slightly. I called again, but I only heard the rain. I gritted my teeth, pulled myself back in, and wiped water off my neck. I wanted answers. I quickly grabbed a pair of old rubber boots and an old jacket I kept in a trunk. I went back to the window and climbed out onto the roof. I tried to keep my balance. My feet slipped a bit on the wet shingles. I slowly moved toward the peak. The wind was loud, and raindrops smacked the jacket's hood. My hands were shaking. My heart felt like it was trying to burst from my chest. When I got closer to the peak, I saw that the figure was crouched down, almost touching the shingles with its knees. It didn't turn to look at me. I shouted again, asking what it was doing. It didn't answer. Its shoulders moved up and down like it was breathing heavily, but it never turned. My legs were trembling. I felt water seeping into my boots. I took another step, and my foot slipped. I almost fell. I let out a grunt and dropped to my knees. I scraped my palm against the shingles. I winced from the pain. When I looked up again, the figure was gone. I glanced around, trying to see where it went. I heard a noise behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I decided it was too risky to stay on the roof. I carefully made my way back to the attic window. My clothes were soaked. My fingers and toes felt numb. I climbed back inside and closed the window. I felt exhausted and frustrated. The next morning, I tried to find any signs of a break-in or forced entry. The attic window was still locked from the inside. The roof had no marks or damage. I felt like I had imagined everything, but I knew I hadn't. The wet footprints had been there. I had seen them clearly. I had seen that figure. I decided to put a heavy chair in front of the attic door the next time it rained, just to see if I heard it move. It was a silly plan, but I didn't know what else to try. Another storm didn't come for a while. I almost relaxed, but every time the sky turned gray, I felt my adrenaline spike again. I hated feeling so on edge in my own home. I spent some time cleaning the attic and sorting boxes, hoping to notice anything unusual, but I never found anything that explained those footprints. The floorboards were still in decent shape. The walls had no cracks. The window had no loose panels. One afternoon, I climbed onto the roof in dry weather, just to see if there was any hidden hatch or hole. I walked carefully and checked every section. I found nothing. No hidden entrances. No obvious places to hide. I wondered if the figure was even human. I tried to push that thought aside because it made me uncomfortable. I just wanted a rational explanation. Eventually, the storm clouds came back at night. The rain hit my windows, and I felt my chest tighten. I walked to the attic door, moved the chair aside, and opened it. The house creaked in the wind. I turned on the attic light. The footprints were back. I approached them slowly. They glistened under the weak bulb. I stood at the first one. I looked at my own foot, still in a sock. The size difference was clear. These footprints didn't match mine. They weren't small enough to be from a teenager, and they weren't large either. They had a narrow shape. The toes were all pressed close together and the heel looked sharp. I squatted down and touched the water in one of them. It felt cold. My hand started to shake. Then I heard a low creaking noise near the roof above me. I froze. I looked at the window. It was closed, but I could see the reflection of part of the attic in the glass. I saw my own shape. Behind me, I thought I saw movement in the reflection. I jerked my head around, but I didn't see anything in the attic. I stared into the darkness. My body felt tense. My vision felt narrow. I stood up and made a decision. I walked straight to the window and opened it. Rain blew in, hitting my shirt. I stuck my head out and peered at the roof. The figure was there, perched near the peak, staring at the horizon again. Its shoulders were hunched and it was motionless. I shouted. The figure didn't turn. I felt an intense urge to confront it. I couldn't stand the mystery anymore. I wanted to know if it had a face. I wanted to know if it could talk. I wanted to know why it made those footprints. I climbed out onto the roof, leaving the attic window open behind me. The rain fell into my eyes, and I could taste it on my lips. My jacket clung to my body. I crawled on my hands and knees to maintain balance. My heart was pounding, and my arms felt weak. I paused halfway between the window and the peak. I lifted my head to look at the figure again. It hadn't moved. I gathered my nerves and crawled a bit closer. I shouted at it one more time. No response. I tried to stand up, but the shingles were slick. I stayed low. I reached a spot where I was maybe 6 feet away. I could see it more clearly. It had the shape of a person with narrow shoulders. The neck was long and the head was tilted forward. The skin on its arms looked pale, but everything was wet and shadowy. I still couldn't see a face. My mouth felt dry even though the rain was hitting my lips. Suddenly the figure shifted. It stood up in a fluid motion and turned its head slightly toward me. I thought I saw 2 dark eyes, but I'm not sure. The figure crouched again, then leaped over the peak of the roof. I heard a scrape and a thud. I scrambled forward, ignoring the pain in my knees. When I got to the peak, I saw nothing. The backyard below was empty. The neighbors' lights were off. The rain fell on everything, and there was no sign of that figure on the ground or anywhere else. I stayed there for a minute, panting. My chest hurt from breathing so hard. My clothes were soaked. I felt my knees throbbing. I turned around and crawled back to the attic window. I slipped inside and collapsed on the floor. Water pooled around me. I sat there staring at the footprints that still led to the window. My mind was racing, but I couldn't think of a single logical explanation for what I had just seen. I closed the window and used an old cloth to wipe up the water on the attic floor. The footprints remained visible until I dried them. When the storm passed a few hours later, everything was quiet again. The next day, there were no new footprints. Everything was back to normal, except I felt uneasy in my own house. I couldn't forget the way that figure moved. It didn't seem like a normal person. It was too quick and it vanished without a trace. I still live in the same house. Every time rain is in the forecast, I feel that tension in my stomach. I go to the attic. I switch on the light. I look for footprints. Sometimes they appear, and sometimes they don't. When they show up, I check the window. I usually see that hunched figure on the roof. It never speaks. It never comes inside. It just leaves those footprints and then disappears. I've considered moving away, but I haven't made that decision yet. Part of me wants answers. I keep thinking I can catch it or talk to it. I never manage to. Whenever I get close, it vanishes. I don't know if it means me harm, but I feel that tension in my muscles every time I see it. I can't relax until the storm ends. I've set up a cheap camera in the attic, but it never catches anything except the wet footprints. The lens gets some water drops on the floor. It never records any figure walking around. It's like the prints appear out of nowhere. For now, I live with the uncertainty. I watch the sky. When the first drops of rain hit my roof, I feel my pulse quicken. I climb the stairs, open the attic door, and shine my flashlight around. The footprints appear. They always lead to the window. I approach the window and I look outside. I spot that shape, crouched on the roof, looking toward the horizon. I stand there waiting to see what it does. Then at some point it leaps away or melts into the darkness, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain and those footprints on the attic floor.